Well, good evening, dear listeners. It's Do You Expect to Work? No, it's not. It's Cinematronix. It's with Dave again. Hello, Dave.
Good evening, folks.
Yeah.
This is a surprise guest.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of like to fill in the gaps of Do You Expect to Talk? To a degree.
We have often said if Chris presented "This Is Your Life," I'd have 57 red books by now. I'm just surprised at work every fucking week. All right.
Oh, I didn't realise I had this life. Wow, let's see.
Thanks. Yeah.
I bet you won't guess who this person is, Dave. I don't know who it is.
We're always really cautious about spilling details on each other because Becca's a much more private person than either of us, really. Not that we give out a lot of our personal life, but she did actually say during the John Rick recording quite openly she'd had some health issues, and she continues to have some health issues. We don't want anyone to worry, don't want any listeners to worry. She'll be fine, but she hasn't been fit to record.
It's not corona.
It's not corona, and it's not like a lifelong problem or anything. She's literally got a virus like any of us would get, but then got like another one at the same time, that sort of thing. She just needs a bit of time to recover.
So, but yeah, no, we're fine. We've not been run down by coronavirus. It's all been fine. Don't worry, listeners.
Yeah.
So today we're going to sort of just have a little bit of a chatathon to a degree.
Welcome to all our new Italian listeners on just the basis that you're all stuck at home. So statistically, a few of you are desperately looking up podcasts to fill your fucking time.
Yeah. So welcome. Bonjour. Oh no, that's French. Sorry.
Bonjour.
So seeing as we originally are a Bond podcast, so yeah, we were gonna basically, listeners, we're gonna just sort of have a little bit of a kind of winter review ish, and a little bit of a catch up about what's been going on, especially because there's a lot of Bond newsy stuff, and just a bit of
think of it as like the summer review, but with far less planning and wearing warmer clothes.
Yes, yes, pretty much.
Because before we start recording the summer one, we do studiously list out the films we're going to talk about and stuff, and what ones he's seen and I haven't seen, and vice versa. We haven't done any of that tonight. We've literally gone, let's give some people a podcast, because we haven't. I don't think we've put anything else. I don't think we've recorded since the very, very start of February.
Yeah, which is about a month away now, isn't it? So
by the time this comes out, it'll be like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah. So wow, it's been that long.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the podcast came out on something like the 7th. I recorded the Smorgasbord. If any of you want to go to Smorgasbord Pod, that's Smorgasbord spelled Bored. I have just done an episode of that.
And did you play fun games on that episode?
We played fun games as usual. I can tell Pete's time is not as free as it used to be, because he hasn't even edited it. It's just gone out as it was. There's no music over it or anything. But it was a fun episode, and it's gone out fine. And it's the first Smorgasbord in about 18 months.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'm on that. If anyone wants, just can't get enough of us. Chris, have you been on anything at all? Don't think you have, have you?
No, I haven't. I mean, this is the only thing I do now. Currently. It's just a matter of time. Sort of shifts, and when I do get free time, I kind of tend to be in a mood of fuck it, I can't be. So, it tends to kind of I actually kind of value my free time, or just sort of sit in pajamas all day watching Netflix and YouTube. It's living the life, but yeah,
there's other things to look forward to. I mean, Disney Plus launches in a couple of weeks.
Apparently so, yeah. Which. Yeah, are you going to get that Disney Plus? Are you going to give it a go, or?
I've already got it. They've got an early bird year payment thing. So I paid £50 for 12 months.
Okay.
£49.99. Yeah, I've already got it.
See, that's quite good for an OPI. I don't know how much it is normally.
It's $59.99 a year, or it's a bit like Amazon Prime in that if you get Amazon Prime monthly, it adds up to a bit more than if you pay the yearly fee, and Disney Plus is the same. It's like $5.99 a month. Or $59.99 a year, so you get a month or two effectively free on the year payment, and I've got £10 off the top of that as well.
Yeah.
It launches on so it launches here March 24th. But I went to see Onward yesterday, the new Pixar film, and the short before it was a Maggie Simpson short.
All right.
So yeah, it's actually welcomes the Simpsons to the Disney family.
All right. Okay.
It's literally a Maggie Simpson short, with Marge and Homer are in it, but I don't even know if they speak. It's all Maggie's perspective.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah.
Okay. So yeah,
So
I wonder how that's gonna crack on, because you're gonna have all the Marvel shows, aren't you? And
I don't know what. Well, obviously, anything they make new will appear worldwide. Anything else, there are rights issues. But apparently, they've smoothed out the Simpsons ones, so we're getting seasons 1 to 30 of the Simpsons. I think with the Marvel films, I would imagine we'll get more of them than say ever appeared on Netflix in one hit.
Yeah.
But whether we'll get all 23 at the time of recording, I don't know. But they might rotate them a bit. And what is it? It's Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, sort of Disney branded stuff, and National Geographic, isn't it? That's basically the 5 brands that underpin Disney Plus.
I mean,
we'll have to see.
It will be good. I mean, it would have been good had it been out when we did Star Wars and Marvel, because then we could have had it's just the one place we could have gone to just pay.
Would have been a bit easier. Yeah, we had to find a lot of films. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've taken a punt for 50 quid on it being worth it for a year.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously, what I could have done is bought a month of it and thought this ain't worth it till the autumn or whatever. But just The Simpsons alone, I haven't seen The Simpsons in years, because it hasn't been... I was about to jump on the bandwagon and say it's not that good these days. How would I know if I don't watch it? But certainly its reputation isn't what it once was.
No.
And so I haven't really watched any of it for years. I mean, the last time I even saw newish episodes were the middle of, about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the last brand new one might have been the first one Ricky Gervais wrote. So... for that alone, I should get enough to justify that. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Apart from that,
you got all the classic episodes as well, haven't you?
You got all the classic episodes there, and of just some of the old Disney animations films I've not seen in such a long time. So just for going down a couple of months of nostalgia, it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Whether it continues over the years to continue to produce new product is... We'll have to see how the TV shows come out. I'm more hopeful for them than the ones that they made for Netflix. But again, when they launched all the Netflix stuff, it was it's all connected. And over time, it really wasn't. It didn't matter. Only the films really mattered. The Mandalorian, I'm a little bit on the fence about. I have seen The Mandalorian, all but the final episode, actually, which I will get to. But the fact I'm not rushing to it tells me something. I love the tone. I love the feel. I love the music. It's like a spaghetti western. There's so much I like about it. But there's really kind of no story there. No. He's kind of just wandering around from week to week. So I don't...
With a baby think there's a great Yoda show. Thing.
Yeah, which... Yeah, okay. It is kind of cute, but I don't know. It just... That's the one bit about it. I think, it's the iconography of Boba Fett and the branding of Yoda and his species. So I think as much as it seems like a brave new direction for Star Wars, isn't it? It's not really, is it? I'm not anti it. I mean, I really loved the first couple of episodes, but then 4 and 5 in, it was becoming a bit of a chore every week just to watch this sort of 35 minutes, because the episodes are short. But it was 35 minutes of not very much. And then you'd wait another week to watch another half an hour of not very much. So I like the tone, and I like what it hints for the future of Star Wars more than I like the actual product, in that it shows me they can play with genre a bit, although there's always been a bit of Western in Star Wars anyway. It shows me they can play with genre a bit. Not every score needs to sound exactly like John Williams, and that they can do new things. So The Mandalorian, to me, is more promising than it's really good. But we'll see where it goes. I mean, I haven't seen the last episode, so I haven't seen how they capped it off. And they do have a second season coming fairly soon.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I mean, it's interesting enough for me to keep watching it. I don't know which one I'm looking forward to most, really. I mean, certainly... they're doing a Cassian Andor series. I'm not as bothered about that. But the Marvel series interests me more, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head which ones particularly interest me most.
See, I've got a hunch. I mean, maybe the Winter Soldier one, the Falcon and Winter Soldier one, would be like would do really well. But I've got a feeling that the other ones would just be kind of a bit second tier, like a bit like that'll come across as a bit more of a novelty.
Yeah, because you've got
WandaVision and that.
Is too strong a word, but you've got established stars of a film series appearing on the small screen, which will have a novelty value to it. But if it's just busy work and doesn't really add anything, I mean, we'll see. I've seen the trailer to WandaVision, and I like. They seem to be doing something interesting, but I couldn't tell you what it is because it's a masterful tease, really, in that it's told us nothing. But we'll see. They'll start rolling out fairly soon, and I know there's a She-Hulk series coming, which does intrigue me because I don't know if that's going to be CG augmented or what on television. You know what I mean?
With an Alison Brie type.
With potentially Alison Brie. I like Alison Brie, but
no, I like that gag where they're like, actually, we're looking for an Alison Brie type.
What about Alison Brie? It's the same with Laura Linney, isn't it? Love Actually, if only we could get someone like Laura Linney. Well, Laura Linney. All right then. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm in for Disney Plus, but I've got some concerns about it. Only in that there was a bit of me pleased to see a Simpsons short, and a bit of me like, oh shit, because they used to use that to give some of their shorts almost felt a bit experimental.
Yeah.
By and large, I don't generally love them, but they give work to up and coming people who may be directing for them in a few years' time.
Yeah.
So the fact that they wasted a slot on a Simpsons short, a 31-year-old property at this point, I thought was a bit like, oh, okay, really? I don't know. Disney are a mixed bag for me because Pixar still make some good quality stuff. There are more sequels in there, and it's a bit patchier, but they still make. I mean, I saw Onward yesterday, really enjoyed it. The most recent Star Wars trilogy. We know what I thought of that. Or parts of it anyway. Certainly the landing. I hated the Rise of Skywalker. And but Marvel have done great work by and large. So I never know whether Disney are the problem or actually they just give quite a lot of autonomy to their studios, and what they do with it is mixed. I don't know.
Yeah. But it's hard to know. I mean, Marvel, you can at least point to say Kevin Feige, can't you? And just say, well, he's the head guy. He's kind of the overarching sort of coordinator, if you will. He's in charge of the whole thing. So you can say, right, well, that's how Marvel have done well, because they've had someone with an overall vision and someone who's made the decisions. Whereas Star Wars, I'm not entirely sure whether it's just been a bit too much made out committee, too much studio interference coming in at the last minute, or just a bit too other stuff going on, whether internal or not, I don't know. But there is a little bit of a...
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll never know. I mean, the natural reaction has been to sort of blame most of it on Kathleen Kennedy. Well, I suppose she runs Lucasfilm, so technically the buck stops with her. But how much of it is Disney? How much of it is just a lot of trust in J.J. Abrams? How much of it is that what Colin Trevorrow was trying to do wasn't seen as quite working out, therefore they went back to JJ and it was all rushed?
Yeah.
I don't know, because for me, I know The Last Jedi's got its detractors to say the least. But actually, my biggest problem with the series, it was the final one that ruined all three retrospectively for me, because at that point you realise they've got no plan. And they've just ruined that film, and they've actually even done a bit of damage to the original trilogy with it. And I'm not trying to go for hyperbole here. Oh, it's raped my childhood. No, it hasn't. The original three films are still good. But you watch them with a little bit of foreknowledge of what's coming, and it has damaged it a little bit.
Well, yeah. Palpatine, just doing that
Yeah,
alone is just
it for me. It's that bad. But again, I don't want to knock anyone who enjoys it.
no,
You
no.
know, if people can get something out of it, great. And I'm not insulting you for not you, but people for liking it. But it wasn't for me at all. But it was bad enough that it actually retrospectively kind of damaged stuff that's outside of that film, and it's left me a little bit ambivalent about more Star Wars for a while. I'm in no hurry for them to announce anything, but obviously with Disney Plus they'll start putting TV out and stuff like that. I mean, they've delayed the Obi-Wan Kenobi show in order to retool the scripts because the scripts are crap apparently. Well, on the one hand you could look at it and say what the hell's going on at Lucasfilm. On the other hand you could look at it and say, well, actually it went to the powers that be and they are exercising quality control now.
Yeah.
When they don't have a drop dead date.
Yeah, I mean, you rather hold it back and be quality than than
which
crap.
isn't something you can do on the big screen.
No. Speaking of holding back, what should you make of Bond being pushed back just as we're about to, just weeks away? Weeks away.
We got the announcement on, I want to say Wednesday, which would be about the 4th of March. And the film comes out on the 2nd of April in the UK. Yeah. So the delay, 29 days before the film came out, we were told it would be pushed back a further 7 months and 10 days. So instead of, we went from, I think it was 29 days to wait to something like 252 days to wait or something.
And the hype was, heating up because you had the new song revealed. I think everyone, it seems to be like people getting ready for it.
Well, it was the first time in a while Eon had impressed me. Now, I've given them enough shit, so I ought to give them some credit. As a recap, most of my shit is based on the fact that, again, they don't release them fast enough. Now, I'm not saying they need to be every 12 months. I don't think they even need to be every 2 years. And I think, by and large, if delays if you create something special aren't necessarily a bad thing, but we've had long gaps leading into not very good films a few times, and I just think 5 years for a Bond film is utterly ridiculous. Even if had it made its original date with Danny Boyle, that was 4 years. It's too much. And I just they said things like, I think everyone's tired, and it's like, well, I made fun of that because whilst that's undoubtedly true, and I don't want to work people into their graves, but from a PR perspective, it's the worst thing you can say because you're basically saying, I'm not up to this anymore. Yeah. One's 80, one's 60, and we're tired. It's like, well, give it to people who aren't tired, And then they consistently have problems with distribution, and you think, well, sell it to somebody who's a distributor as well. Then it's careful what you wish for, because it could go somewhere else and be mined to death. I appreciate all of that, but it's not one thing or the other. It doesn't have to be. Anyway, listen to previous shows where I've talked about it. I've said at length what I think. But another problem I always have with them is their marketing in recent years and tie-ins and stuff has been dreadful. You get to James Bond Day, which is like the 5th of October each year because that's the anniversary of Dr. No being released, and they do nothing really. They when they released Skyfall all those years ago, they made that film Everything or Nothing to come out on James Bond Day, but not in the UK. And we got a DVD, not even a Blu-ray or a download. Well, maybe would you have got downloads back then? Certainly a Blu-ray. Yeah. But we got like a DVD the following year in the winter or early spring. And I just think, the video game tie into that film was terrible. I just think they miss a trick. They never go to Comic-Con. They never do anything like that. So, having just recapped everything I've knocked them for, the campaign for No Time to Die has been pretty good. The posters have been, by and large, better. The first teaser was awful, but the first teaser poster was awful. But all the posters since then have been the best that Bond have produced in a few years. The first trailer was excellent. The TV spots are good. You've got little inserts with Cary Fukunaga talking about Bond, over a little clip, and the song was released and they timed it to be on the Brits and things like that. it's not for everyone, but I think the song's all right, fine. I quite like the song, and it's not the tone of song I wanted. But if you're going to give me a song of that type, I like it.
Yeah.
And so I think they were doing a really good job, and they were just building to this peak, And then Daniel Craig presented SNL this week, so
Yeah.
like 3 weeks before the film, 4 weeks in America. It's just they were doing everything right, and of course it's gone for 7 months, and they'll have spent a lot of money on marketing that film.
Yeah.
They will have spent a lot of money by this point, and they've got to kind of start from a standing start again later in the year, and make it feel like a new product. I know no one will have seen it, but there's still a bit of it's going to look tired if just to play the same trailers again later in the year. So they're going to have to really think about their approach in the autumn, if indeed it does get released in November.
Well, the thing that it's got going for it is they've only released one trailer. Now, I actually like the fact there was only one trailer for it, because I don't think
it was a bit of a hybrid anyway, because it was supposedly the teaser, but it was the length of a full theatrical trailer, and it actually had, but it had slightly less in the way of story beats than you would get in a full trailer. So it's almost a full trailer. It was like a teaser and a half. And I was fine with it, but they've done TV spots coming off it, and character bits and character posters, and the last Bond poster I saw, which was Craig in 3 different poses, such an echo to one that was similar for Casino Royale and stuff. So I thought they were doing an excellent job, I have to say. Star Wars, and things like that make you worry about if it was ever sold. To be honest, I think they've got to up their game. You can't keep leaving 4 and 5 years between films. You just can't. But having got into it this time, I thought they were doing a good job.
Yeah, it's just a bit weird because the song itself was all right. I mean, I know I gave like the Sam Smith one shit, and this one seems to be pretty on a similar path.
Well, if you take Adele and Sam Smith and smash them together, you sort of get this. Yeah.
You do, yeah, a bit. I mean, I'd be twice. I mean, my main fit when I heard it was Billie Eilish. Now, bear in mind, I have no like sort of reference to like what her music actually sounds like apart from Bad Guy, which so when I heard like shit was doing it, I was a little bit
oh God.
I mean, it's not necessarily like I think she shit. I just think it could be the wrong choice because and that's not like knocking her, but it just felt very much like it felt very much like you're trying to like too hard to be relevant. And like sort of, this one's for the kids. You know what I mean? Rather than picking.
It's almost like years ago when Cubby would get a young Barbara's opinion, and I think that's how we ended up with Sheena Easton actually, when Barbara was about 20.
Yeah.
I had mixed feelings on it. On the one hand, you don't want to overcompensate as heading towards middle age now as I am, and I go, yeah, it's great because I just want to sound like I'm up for like anything that's fresh and new. But on the other hand, I found the reaction to it incredibly predictable and lacking any self-awareness at all. In that the Bond fan base is aging, which is another reason you can't leave 5 years every time. You have to be sort of building the next generation of fans. So you had a lot of 40 and 50-somethings going, this is dreadful. And I'm thinking, you are talking... not everything is for you.
Yeah.
They already have your money. Now, they've still got to make a film you like. I'm not saying you're not important, but they need to grow the fan base. And you can't have Shirley Bassey every fucking time, And you get it every couple of years. Every time they announce a new person, you get that same middle-aged reaction of, Gah.
Well, I mean, people would have said it about Adele. You know what I mean? I mean,
they did, exactly. I think I prefer Adele's theme. And I think the only worry I've got is... Adele's theme, when you actually watch Skyfall, it literally has forward momentum. Literally, because the camera's moving forward all the way through, or the virtual camera is moving forward all the way through that title sequence. When I listen to this, I think about it a little bit like Sam Smith's song, in that it was one of Danny Kleinman's worst sequences, and it wasn't because he did anything wrong, it's because the song was fairly inert. So there was no momentum in the sequence, and I do have a slight worry that could happen here.
Yeah.
But whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to it now.
It's not a bad thing if you don't like the song, but it's popular. If you know what I mean, it's like, yes, I know it's got to come out a certain way, but yeah, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I'm kind of used to it now. I'm kind of used. Because at first I thought, because I mean, I remember back in the day, you think like when Die Another Day came out, when it was Madonna doing it, and on paper you think that makes sense. Then you hear the track and you think, oh my god, that's awful. Fucking awful. Yeah, I was thinking like, oh my god, is it going to be like, this sort of like low sort of tone dubstep? I think, and this is not going to be.
Madonna was always better when she dropped her voice a little bit.
Yeah,
and I think what I had in my head was something from around her Like a Prayer sort of era.
Yeah.
And when the song came out, she was singing right at the top of her vocal range, and the song was abysmal. So you never know quite what you're going to get. I'd rather have a song I like. I'd rather have a song that feels Bond to me. But at the same time, if you're listening to it age 50 or 45 or even 40 and going, I don't like this, you might just be being a bit reactionary, B, having preconceived notions of what songs must always be, and also assuming that everything needs to be aimed at you, and it doesn't.
Well, it's
that's where I am on it.
Well, it's like I think about when you think did it sound Bond? Well, the least bonding sound themes is probably one of the most popular ones, which is Nobody Does It Better.
Nobody does it better. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
that would have stood out like a sore thumb at the time.
So I don't know. I mean, but in terms of it, I thought it's fine. It kind of sort of did what it needs to do. It sounded Bondish. It was simple. It sounded fine. I was listening to like sort of like music cues.
Yeah.
So it's like to hear what potentially the score would sound. I'm actually quite looking forward to actually seeing, because Hans Zimmer has actually brought in Johnny Marr as well, so he's.
Yes.
So I'm actually looking. Hearing that song, obviously, he probably must have done some work on it.
That's the only part of the film that might get revisited, because again, I've seen things online about. I mean, I've even seen conspiracy theories that they've pushed it because the film's troubled or bad.
Yeah.
And I think the bullishness of the campaign around it tells me the whole body language of everyone is so much better than Spectre. Now, that doesn't mean they'll release it and we might not like it, but they think they've made something very good. That doesn't mean we'll like their choices, obviously.
Yeah. Because it could be they might be panicking because they've bought in thinking, oh, we made something really good, and the first test screening was terrible or something like that. They might have gone, oh shit. Do you know what I mean?
The only thing, well, they've got a locked time on it, so that tells me they've got final cut. The only thing that might change, and again, it's down to time, is if they've rushed the score a little, then there is an opportunity, obviously, to say, can I just rescore that bit? But I think the film is the film now. I think it's locked.
Yeah.
As for the thinking behind the delay, I think sometimes you've just got to. Oh, the other thing I read, there was one Twitter feed where I think it was at Bond Movies or something like that, and the whole tone of their debate was furious and behaving like they'd worked out something really secretive, because they said this is about money, not safety. And I'm thinking, when in their statement did they say safety? They didn't. They actually said the global cinematic marketplace or something like that. I'm hearing rumours that they think the film might be insensitive, so I think that leads to the whole idea of some sort of germ warfare in the plot.
That could be tangible.
And I know that some study of if the split of the box office was exactly the same as, I can't remember if they were talking about Spectre or Skyfall. Whichever one it was, one of the last two films, they said if the spread of the box office across the world was identical, the worst hit areas for coronavirus is 38% of that. All the Chinese theatres are shut. Northern Italy has got 16 million people on lockdown. And MGM desperately need a hit. MGM are looking to sell again. I don't know if they're in trouble or they just want a hit to be make them marketable.
Yeah.
But they're very reliant on Bond. They need this to be a big hit. One of the reasons they paired up with Universal reportedly, as Universal sold them on a strategy to get this film past $1 billion at the worldwide box office. In light of all that, plus the other thing you've got to remember is most of the other films that I'm expecting to be delayed are later. I mean, I cannot believe Fast 9 will go off on time because its Chinese box office has been massive in the last few entries. Marvel's, if you look at the Avengers, it did $1.2 billion in its first week, and I think almost half of that was China. I may have that wrong, by the way, that's off memory, but it did big box office in China. And you think, well, that they would have to go, but they're a month and nearly 2 months after Bond.
Yeah.
So I just think, yes, they've erred on the side of caution, but I can't really blame them.
I mean,
people are pissed off because they wanted to see the film. It's as simple as that.
Oh yeah, I was miffed, but I'm very honest about the fact that because I want to see the fucking film. Do you know
exactly.
what I mean? I mean, I can agree from the aspect. I mean, in comparison, say the other studios, you know, with Marvel and the Fast franchise and things like that. You know, I was like thinking, well, why aren't anyone else pushing their movies back then? You know, I was thinking, what is there going to be a knock-on effect? And I can't really see that happening. But in Eon's defence, it is their one and only baby. You know what I mean?
It's MGM have got, really, I mean, franchise-wise, MGM have, I suppose, I don't know if Rocky is still coming out on MGM, you know, Creed, but then they take a fraction of the box office. I think they take about 150 million, something like that. And I think they've got, theoretically, RoboCop, if they could bring that back successfully. Yeah. They don't have a lot. And, of course, it's a one-shot deal with distributors as well. So Universal have got one contract. You know, if they did this one film and it came out and did half the money, and then the next film they weren't granted another chance, they'd be like, well, that's not really fair, is it? So I get it. I think I mean, other studios have other tentpoles, but just because they haven't been delayed doesn't mean they won't be.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are like, you know, the news is constantly changing. I mean, who knows? I mean, personally, I think it's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. I don't think it will have that much an effect. Yeah, you could probably say China, but then again, you can say, well, the release in China...
Bond isn't that big in China, but it isn't just China. It's lots of different parts of the world.
They've
announced today. I mean, the Bahrain Grand Prix, which takes place in about 2 weeks, so I don't know, 7 to 10 days from whenever you hear this, if you play it the moment it comes through, is going to be behind closed doors. So the Bahrain Grand Prix will not have a crowd.
Yeah.
So the whole world is taking precautions. Schools are closing. Now, is it excessive? We're not scientists. And, I mean, it might have been harder back in the physical days where you had to get film reels out to places. But the fact is, bookings have to be done ahead of time. You can't just say, like, a week before we're cancelling it. Surely. You'd get sued by cinema chains everywhere. There has to be some planning. So they needed to look at it. And I would think... for several reasons. Firstly, it's their only property. Secondly, the two people in charge of Eon are older than the average population, so they're probably a bit more risk-averse. There's lots of reasons for it. Am I pissed off? Yeah, it's going to be 5 years. I really didn't want to wait, but so what? It happens. There's fucking bigger things to worry about.
Well, yeah, that's true. It is just annoying. And it annoys me more the fact that I know what I'm annoyed about is... not seen a film for as quickly as I want to, but
it'll be literally like John Wick 1.
Yeah,
we're getting that in. Oh no, we're not.
but yeah, I mean, I was just like thinking, if this gets pushed back again, it's going to be fucking ridiculous. But you know, I was like, you know, the real kicker is, what if this gets leaked now?
Yeah, there is that. I have thought about that. What if it leaks? I don't know. I don't know physically where the film is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know if you can hack servers. I don't know how film storage works now. You know, I had more of an idea where they were physically master reels and stuff like that. But of course, it's all virtual now, and I don't know on what server that film is sitting. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I mean, it could leak. Other films have leaked in the past. And when they do staggered worldwide releases, quite often the world has seen it before it gets to us because America made us wait 4 months. I've seen at least 2 or 3 films this year that I would have paid to see theatrically, but America left it so long that it leaked online, and it's like, well, if you're going to disrespect your audience that much, fuck you.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. We are still getting it for America. We're getting a week before
12th and 25th, I think. So it's nearly 2 weeks they've got to wait. Whereas I think it was only a week before.
Yeah,
that's insult to injury for American listeners. Yeah, I really think
that's But it was a similar sort of gap with Skyfall though. Skyfall came out about a 2 week before.
It's either a week or two usually. I think Skyfall was. I think you're right. I don't know, but I think the gap has actually grown slightly. Now they've moved it. We get it November the 12th. They get it on the 20th. At the moment, we're kind of in uncharted territory here with all of it, and everyone's an expert all of a sudden. I'm reading constant memes and posts about comparing it to flu and cancer and heart disease and all the rest of it, and it's like, well, actually, no one is suggesting the number of deaths today is comparable to the worldwide number of deaths from cancer today. It's the trajectory of it and the potential death rate on that trajectory. That's what's worrying people. It isn't that like a couple of thousand people have died or whatever it is. It might be more than that actually. I think it's about 4,000. It's not that 4,000 people have died in total or 200 and whatever it is in the UK have it. It isn't that. It's where it might go.
Yeah. And that's
so
the thing.
The memes are actually just as ignorant as the ignorance they're trying to dispel.
Well, Dave, it is social media. I mean, come on.
I know it is. But people mean well with it. They're trying to say to people, don't worry. And I think that's wise, because I read an article today that the government fear deaths could be up to 100,000. Well, that's just scaremongering. I'm sorry, that is just scaremongering. But the worry is not where we are now. The worry is where it's going, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of it is just, we just do not know, and a lot of it is kind of scaremongering. I mean, like, for sake, places like I went to Tesco today, and and before everywhere was looked absolutely fine unless you went to the egg section and the toilet roll section.
Why eggs, do you reckon?
I don't know.
And I mean, toilet roll, the shits is not a symptom. I don't know if it's people think they're going to get locked in at home and they're going to be in this terrible situation of having shitty bums. They can't do anything with that.
Well, I'm thinking it's to blow your nose. I think it's like that. But do you know what I mean? But I don't know. It's just weird. It seems to be very selective.
Well, the hand gels you understand.
Yeah.
Soap.
And people have been robbing that from hospitals as well.
Yeah. I tell you what, the only sense of it I've had in the air sort of so far, if you like, in the air, not meant to be any kind of pun on the transmission of it, but I gave blood last week. And I turned up to give that blood at a hall somewhere where we do that. And they had the hand gels outside, which you would expect they always do. But there was just that little bit more emphasis on using them. And it was brought up in conversation a couple of times. And you could sort of see people looking at each other a bit and not sitting too close together. Just little things like that. And people are being very careful with touching surfaces and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's definitely, even those that aren't irrationally frightened are taking steps. I mean, my hands have never been as dry as they are now because I'm washing them more and I'm washing them for longer.
Yeah.
So like the skin on my knuckles is like quite a bit drier, but that's not fear mongering. That's just a precaution we're being asked to take. I don't know what it's like for you in a hospital.
I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, look, to be fair, I'm a bit more, a little bit more carefree as a personality anyway.
Yeah, you are.
But I'll be honest. The place where I work in a hospital environment is probably the place I heard the least about it, which is just give you emphasis of what it's really like. Because I think for us, it's just business as usual, isn't it? It's just like, oh, okay, well, it's all right. Well, People come in,
I
people
guess
come in and
there
get it
as
through,
well.
and it's like, well, how do you
If
treat
I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it.
Yeah, that there's also that, and there's also we just treat it the same way we treat it normally anyway. So what difference does it
And for
make?
most people, that is true. I mean, we're not here to give medical advice, but for anyone worrying about it, from the best of all advice, the vast majority will experience it somewhat like flu.
Yeah.
And then there's a few more that will experience it similar, but may have a bit more difficulty with breathing. And then there's like a tiny percentage that are critical with it.
I mean,
it's not tiny; it's 5%.
Yeah.
It still leaves you on very good odds.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, the thing about that worries me is the 2-week incubation period. Now, when you have something like that, then fuck knows. I mean, like how you could like give it to like hundreds of people before you even realise you had it in the first place. Do you know what I mean? But then it's got me thinking like that, because you have, around Christmas time, everyone's fucking ill. Yeah. Everyone had something at some point, or knew someone. It was like everyone had the flu. So I'm thinking, has this been around earlier and we just not realised? Has it just like mutated into something like that more worse, or what? I don't know. But it gives you food for thought, isn't it?
That's why the likely death rate is lower than published, because at the moment, if you go by deaths compared to who's noted to have it, about 3.4% or something. But the point's been made, there'll be people out there who've had it really mild, not done anything about it, and they're not counted in the figures. So the real death rate is probably, it's estimated to be around 2%, between 1 and 2%. But that's still like 10 to 20 times flu. So we'll just see. But again, with flu, how many people actually go, report they have flu?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Anyway. Yeah. So, I don't know. I suspect there'll be more counsel to come. That could leave us in a very, very interesting position, forgetting the actual illness for a minute and just thinking about logistics. I mean, later in the year, you could struggle to actually get everything scheduled.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the things, like, sort of, at the moment, the cinema is shy of large releases. I mean, Bond was, like, everything was making way for Bond, and now Bond's not there. You got another few gaps before...
Well, the funny thing is, Kong moved for that reason. I think Godzilla Kong moved for that reason, and it's back in its path now. It's like it comes out a week after Bond in this country.
So,
I mean, I think my bigger worry with cinema chains is, I mean, one of the cinema chains down here that lost quite a lot of money last year. We could be in a situation of businesses going to the wall. We've already lost an airline in this country that was in trouble anyway, but any chance it had of rebounding back was totally killed by the effect this has had on demand, like 40% drops and stuff like that. So I don't know where it's going to leave us, but we'll see. I mean, in terms of what I've seen of the Bond film, it looks really nice. The guy really clearly is fascinated by Daniel Craig's face. He sort of shoots Daniel Craig very differently to the way Mendes did. There's a lot of close in on the sort of structure of his face. It looks really nice, and I just think if I'm going to have a problem with the film, it'll be story choices. I don't think it'll be anyone's performances, commitment, look, sound, or anything like that.
Do you think it's going to have like a big twist? Like it's going to be like a reveal? Like it's... Like it turns out that Rami Malek is Dr. No, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I hope not, but let's see.
Or Dr. Yes.
People still, even all these years on, so many people don't get the reboot thing. They still believe at the end of this film there's a possibility that like Craig's Bond will be handed a file of like something going wrong in Jamaica, and that will be like come full circle to the start of the series. And it's like they're not linked. Honestly, it's a reboot. It doesn't work like that. But I don't know, and I'm really not going to guess. I am a little worried. I don't. My only worries are not the series changing, not Billie Eilish getting the song. None of that. I expect the series to evolve a little bit over time. I mean, people complain about Craig's Bond not being fun or being a tortured hero. It's just like, well, that's the time we live in, I'm afraid. And actually, it wouldn't be an easy life, would it? So times change, and actually, Roger Moore just fucking perving it round the world wouldn't really work now. It's debatable whether it worked at the time, to be honest. And when you watch Pierce Brosnan's films now, they're just pathetically lightweight for the most part. I don't think they're dated very well at all. So it's not that, but there are elements of the sort of change direction that do bother me. I mean, forget specific plot twists because they're just decisions made for a given film. But we see too much of MI6, full stop. We see too much of MI6. M should be there for a couple of minutes. Q should be there for a couple of minutes. Moneypenny should just be, there for a couple of minutes. It's a Bond film. It's not an MI6 film. I've never liked that, and I'm thinking this film will have a lot of that again. But we'll just see. I'm totally hedging my bets on it. I think I'm watching a bit of Fukunaga's work at the moment, and I've postponed a lot of it till later in the summer. But I did watch all of True Detective 1. I did start watching Maniac. I've watched some of Sin Nombre, though I didn't have time to finish it, unfortunately. And his stuff is interesting, at least. So I'm all in for what we're going to get, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm actually looking forward to seeing it, and now unfortunately it's going to be longer than I was anticipating.
Yeah. So what have we seen in the last few months then that's worth talking about?
Well, you've seen Onward, haven't you?
I saw Onward yesterday, yeah.
Yeah.
I've done a written review that will be out by this time this comes out as well, so at Set the Tape there is my written review of it. I wasn't sure on concept at all, although when I heard what the concept was, I thought, and I've written this in the review, the pitch meeting to this must have been really funny. Because they spend the film literally travelling around with the legs of their late father. Like the bottom half of him from like his belt line down. It's right? And that's kind of a funny concept. I really liked it. I thought it had loads of heart. Really, really enjoyed it. It's
a bit of a tearjerker.
I think all good Pixar films are to some degree towards the end. It reminded me in a strange way, they're not similar films, but it reminded me of Stan and Ollie, in that you went to see Stan and Ollie wondering what it would be, and it turned out to be like a platonic love story. And without giving anything away, Onward kind of is as well. And the character works really strong, because I almost had an alternate version playing in my head as I was going along, where it was this film but in lesser hands. And Chris Pratt's character in most films would be fucking insufferable, and probably played a bit dumb. And they really don't do that. And none of the characters look anything like the people voicing them, but the voices perfectly suit the characters as well. I had no idea that was Julie Louis-Dreyfus in it as their mother, and it is, and it works really well. The two leads really work well together, and it's just got a ton of heart. I can comfortably, without even thinking, rattle off at least half a dozen Pixar films that I think are more, perhaps better, perhaps more memorable, more of a tentpole for a studio, that when you go, oh, that's the studio that made.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be naming Onward in a few years' time. It's much lower key than that, despite the quality of the cast. But it's a film that's just it feels authored. It feels like a story someone wanted to tell, rather than a studio saying cynically, what do we make next? Now was almost certainly the latter, but there just seems like a lot of heart in it. There's a load of attention to detail, lots of little things in the background I noticed, like details in naming conventions. You'll understand what I mean when you see the film. But I spotted the odd little joke in the background, and I'm thinking, well, there must be several I didn't spot, and things like that. So it's just got loads of thought has gone into it. It feels like a script that has had several passes at it to increasingly tease out this detail. I really, really liked it.
Oh, good.
More than I was expecting. I had a triple bill yesterday. The one I saw Doolittle yesterday.
Oh, you know what? I was actually thinking about seeing that.
It's just dreadful. I didn't really want to see it. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with the whole story, but I made a hash of a booking on my car. My car was going in for service and MOT yesterday, and I fucked up the booking. And in correcting it, they were accommodating me, so they had to have my car for a lot longer. So I just had tons of time to kill, and the only way films would line up and fill my time was if I went to see Doolittle, because I have my car done equidistant between our two major cinemas, just so I go into Plymouth and I drop my car and I go around the cinema, watch a couple of films and walk back. Since then, we've had another cinema, but it's the same distance, just in the other direction. So I ended up going to our brand new one, and Doolittle was the first film, and I thought, I tuned out entirely. I don't really know what happened in the last half hour. I lost interest. I sort of came back to for about the last 10 minutes. Robert Downey Jr.'s decided to play the character Welsh.
Yeah,
it's just fucking bizarre. The story's so what? There's two kids in it. They're so what as well, and it's just really shit. It's just an absolutely nothing film, and you're watching it and thinking, how much money have they spunked on this shit? All the character dialogue, and by that I mean the animals. Mm-hmm. You hear the animals talking, and it feels like a kid's film when they talk, but worse than that, it feels like it was kind of written by a kid. It's really bad. I
remember seeing the trailer like around
I
December
would not
time.
have seen it apart from my issue yesterday, because the trailer looked terrible, didn't it?
Yeah, I saw the trailer. I thought, oh my god, that looks absolutely fucking awful. Like just and part of me was kind of curious. I mean, I haven't seen it, and I don't think I'm going to see it now. But I was tempted, just like, you know what? I feel like watching something completely shit, and I didn't see that at the end. I think I watched The Boy 2, but
okay,
which was I think it was mildly more entertaining. I would have guessed, but yeah, it just looked like, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, it just everything looked absolutely so. And apparently he pulls at the end. He pulls something out of a dragon's arse.
Yes.
Right.
That was a scene. That's all I can say about it. Really, it was like someone thought that was an idea. All right. And it's meant to be funny, but yeah, it's really not. Nothing really works in it, and it's expensive because you got a lot of CG animals and stuff. But every time they're like on the ship or outdoors, it looks as green screen as anything. Do you remember in Die Another Day? Now, I'm not going to point to the worst of the CG in that film, by the way, but the bit where they're supposedly in Cuba, they actually filmed it in Spain, but the bit where they're in Cuba, there's a bit where she dives backwards off the cliff, which is a terrible effect. But then you've got a reaction shot of Brosnan just looking, and you immediately spot that's an insert.
Yeah.
The brain just immediately goes, they're not really there. And it was. Because I listened to the commentary once upon a time, and Brosnan probably said, yeah, we filmed that bit back at Pinewood. It's like, I fucking knew it. I could have told you that. And all of Doolittle looks like that. It's not that it looks cheap. It just looks strangely over-processed. It's a colourful film, but you can see that, like, there was potentially a kids' franchise here. And emphasis on a kids' franchise. I don't think it was aimed at us, to be honest. But I don't think it would even work for that. The novelty of cute animals talking and stuff and saying funny lines that are not suited to the 1800s, they're suited to like now. That novelty wears off quite quickly. And Downey is flat out fucking terrible in it. That accent choice is a bad one. It's not quite Dick Van Dyke bad, but it stands out almost as much. It's just like, what are you doing?
You should have just got Tim Dalton.
Yeah. Michael Sheen's in it as well, and Michael Sheen is it's almost like his films are good when he's doing an impression of someone, and when he's not, they're dreadful. There's probably exceptions to that if I went through his filmography, but I always think my mind runs straight to Underworld and things like that, and he's kind of like the bad guy in this, or one of them, and it's really poor.
See, I always get confused when you say like, "Oh, Michael Sheen." Instantly, my head goes to like Martin Sheen.
Yeah. I get that's similar.
Charlie Sheen's dad's in it.
Yeah, Michael Sheen, who's normally does quite broad impersonations of people. Obviously, he played David Frost. He's played Tony Blair several times. He's just filmed something as Chris Tarrant. What's the other one? Brian Clough. He played Brian Clough in The Damned United, which was quite good. Anyone listening from outside this country might not know all of those people, but if you obviously look the guy up, you can look up these films. Obviously, Frost Nixon was fairly big worldwide. That was a Ron Howard film and a good one. But yeah, it's really poor. I've had a run of well, I think about 4 in a row haven't been that great, because the previous week I saw Greed, the Steve Coogan film.
Yeah.
The week before that I saw Birds of Prey, and the week before that I saw The Rhythm Section. And I don't think any of them have been particularly good. Onward is the first decent film I've seen since Bad Boys for Life, which came out surprisingly well.
Yeah. But that was like the sort of that January hit, wasn't it, really? Bad Boys for Life.
Yeah, I mean, my bar was low when I went in, because I saw Bad Boys when I was at university. It came out in 95 before I went, but it came out on like home video while I was there. And somebody I knew rented it. I think there were a group of us watching it. And I can only remember about one line from it. It's the bit where Martin Lawrence is on a bed and someone's trying to like make him have sex with her. And he's pretending to be Will Smith's character, I think. And he says, "When I come with the thunder." And that's about all I remember from the first film, other than I sort of enjoyed it, but it went on a bit. So I thought the week before I see it, I thought I'll watch Bad Boys 2, because I've never seen it, and I'm not a big Michael Bay fan. I would have avoided it. I would have avoided it deliberately at the time, and somehow I've never seen it since. And I watched Bad Boys 2, and I barely got through it. I thought it was unbearable. It was incredibly long. It was the worst ADHD editing I've ever seen. Things like car chases, you just don't focus on anything for more than a second. It's a disastrously awful film. So I went in to Bad Boys for Life with quite a low bar, just thinking, well, if it passes the time. And, well, it wasn't high art, but I was really entertained by it. Those two still play really well off each other. I was reminded of the first film because of his marriage, and I thought, oh, yes, he was married in the first film. Yeah, I remember about that now. And it actually I was a lot more entertained than I expected, and the film passed nicely. Whereas Bad Boys 2, I was just struggling to complete.
Yeah, there's. I mean, Bad Boys 2 is. I mean, I enjoy Bad Boys 2 for what it is, in the kind of hot fuzz kind of element. I mean, it is basically like a 15-year-old's wet dream. It's like there's 1,001 car and gun chases. I mean, the count is like unnecessary, and it is repetitive in a kind of way. It's like they try and like do something undercover. Something happens and there's a big shootout and there's a big mess up, then they go back undercover and do something, there's a big shootout and a big mess up. it is that over again.
Yeah, but
by the time the film normally ends, it's like, oh no, we've got a big massive shootout in Cuba with a big it kind of almost ends like Fast and Furious almost.
Yeah, it does. It did remind me of that, actually, although I barely got to that Cuba section, but I did finish the film. But the thing with Michael Bay is, I don't want to sit and talk about Bad Boys 2 all night because it's 17 years old, but Bad Boys, I've always defended Michael Bay's talent level. It's, as Mark Kermode says, his sensibility is the problem. In that, when you compare him to a Stephen Sommers or a Brett Ratner, McGee, all of those, less Brett Ratner than the others, but certainly those, Roland Emmerich, he's actually more technically gifted than any of them. I watch sometimes his film and think that's a really well composed shot, and he's got a real feel for movement in that bit. The film I'm watching is fucking dreadful, but he'll get decent performances out of actors as well, and not always particularly good ones. Although, when you've got people like Stanley Tucci and Kelsey Grammer acting for you, that you expect something a bit better. Bad Boys 2 actually felt incompetent. There were so many spots where I was like, why has he shot it like that, the fucking idiot? So yeah, I didn't like it. So Bad Boys for Life was really good, but then I went on a terrible run. I had 3 or 4 films before that we might touch on, but I saw The Rhythm Section, which was Eon Productions.
Which was not... I mean, you think Eon would be after, like, as much profit as possible?
Yeah.
I mean, I know Bond's coming up, but seriously?
They barely promoted that film. I saw one trailer for it 1 week before it came out. And bear in mind, I'm in the cinema most weeks. And there's probably a type of film that appears more often than a lot of others in my film watching. In that, like, it's not like I'm watching a Pixar film every week where, of course, they're not going to advertise that. And I saw one trailer. They only made it for 50 million anyway, so which is very light these days for a studio film.
Yeah.
And it was tonally all over the place. She was really good, and it was a real vanity-free performance. I mean, it takes a long time in that film to see Blake Lively anywhere near as attractive as we know she is, except in those flashbacks to when she was in a family. And even when she's fully recovered and a professional, they're not playing on sex appeal except in one scene, really, where she sort of pretends to be a hooker, which kind of at the start of the film she is. So, but kind of the horrible sort of not horrible streetwalking types. I don't mean to insult anybody, but the rougher end of that profession, the tougher end. And she's a drug addict and everything else. But the film's just tonally all over the place. It feels really long. There's not enough there to make a franchise. The whole selling point of the character is she's faking it. She's taught enough to look good at it rather than be good at it. But that would go away through a series as she got better.
She's learning on the job, isn't she? That's basically it.
Which makes it sort of interesting. But you think, well, it's got too many franchise tropes to be an interesting standalone, but it's too standalone to be a franchise. And it's got no levity in it. It's not funny at all. And you think, this is kind of dour. And the action's all right, but she's crap at it. So hence the action scene is somebody crap at action doing reasonably shot action. So I didn't love it. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did see it. I was quite entertained by it.
That's the thing. I didn't walk out thinking that was shit.
Yeah.
I walked out to scratching my head a bit, like, I don't think that even if that did well, I don't think they can franchise it.
No. I mean,
and I think they were hoping they would have something like that.
I can't see a franchise from it, but
no.
I thought, but as a spy actioner thriller, I thought it was pretty decent.
She deserves a bump from that, though.
Yeah,
she deserves something from it. She was great, and it feels more. It's more John le Carré than it is Ian Fleming.
Yeah.
Considering it's from Eon Productions.
And you're right, it is. She is pretty. Her English accent's pretty good as well.
Her English accent. Well, I thought it was more than good. I actually went to check she actually was American and hasn't just been playing American all these years. Because, sorry, to the English ear, it was flawless.
And I think Jude Law is pretty good in it as well.
Yeah, Jude Law was really good in it. Although it was a redux of his. It was a non-evil version of his Captain
Marvel thing
character. I suddenly blanked on that.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is the film gives you everything about his motivation and why we should be interested in him, but it does it after all the bits we're supposed to be interested in him in. So the film has all the ingredients and joking aside, puts them out in the wrong order. So it's a bit of a head scratcher actually, but it passed the time all right. It did feel long because it's like, I think it's about 1:40 or 1:45, and it felt about 2.5 hours. But it was okay. But okay is not that good. I think I gave it 2 stars.
Yeah.
And then I went to see Birds of Prey the following week, which I really didn't like.
No, well, so tell us about Birds of Prey. I didn't think it was particularly great. Being honest, Birds of Prey, bit of a.
That character is far too fucking irritating to be on screen all the way in every scene all the way through. Funnily enough, it's a much better film, but it's almost like Lego Batman for me, which I know people liked. But that was a far more effective character when you had him dropping in and out for like comic relief.
Yeah.
And I felt that was the same with the Harley Quinn character. I didn't like the colour palette of it. It was kind of garish, although it would be with that character. The action was pretty good, but then it should be because it's Chad Stahelski. Well, he certainly did the reshoots anyway. It's meant to be... It's not a Birds of Prey film at all. Those characters are all kind of wasted. And the plot is so what? I can't even remember what the demands of the plot were now. I think she had to protect a kid who'd ingested something that people are after.
A diamond, yeah, which didn't have photos of Ewan McGregor's penis. which was supposedly what was the original story. I don't know how true that is or not.
Right. Ewan McGregor is flat out terrible in it.
I think he's at least having fun. He's having fun being like...
Yeah. It actually looks like they enjoyed making it. It didn't look like... I don't think they will have foreseen it to be a train wreck when they were making it, if you like.
Yeah.
Because Rosie Perez does a great job in it, although she's a bit wasted, but she's very good in it. The whole structure of the film reminded me a little bit of Suicide Squad in that Suicide Squad had this tendency, it's not quite the same flaw, but it evoked the same flaw. Suicide Squad would show us flashbacks of things we saw minutes before.
Yeah.
Without putting any kind of new spin on it or reveal. So it isn't like The Sixth Sense. Well, let's just see where he's clearly dead. Oh, yeah, he's dead there because, it's not like that. It's just we need to see it again for some reason. How stupid do they think we are? And Birds of Prey just had this strange storytelling method of we see something, and because Harley Quinn is kind of scatterbrained and she's the narrator of the film, it's like, actually, I don't want to tell it from there. I need to go back to here. And so it kept leaving scenes unanchored. I didn't like it very much at all. And I was delighted when it was finished. The only thing I will say is that sandwich she struggled to eat did look good.
I was going to say...
Fatty as fuck, but really good.
That was what I was going to say. So if it did one thing, it made me really want to eat that like egg and cheese sandwich.
I did, and it kind of looks grim, but like the best kind of grim,
Yeah.
Like
proper street food, yeah.
Sometimes you buy like something fast food or on the street and the cheese is all melted down the side. It looks like walking bacteria, but it's so good. Yeah, so that was good. And then finally, I suppose this little section, did you see Greed?
No, I didn't bother seeing Greed, no.
I won't say very much about it then. But it was a Michael Winterbottom film with Steve Coogan, so the same pairing that did 24-Hour Party People. I don't think he did a Cock and Ball Story, but they did The Look of Love.
Yeah, he did. Did a Cock and Ball, yeah.
Was that Michael Winterbottom as well?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay. I know they did. He's done all the series of The Trip, which I've really enjoyed. That's really easy watching, The Trip. It's just, people having dinner and ripping into each other a bit with a few plot bits happening and some silly impressions, and I like it. It's it makes you hungry because they always order nice food as well, and they're going to different locations. I like all of them, even the first one, North Yorkshire. Kind of wanted to move there right afterwards. It was shot so nicely, but
that's probably the best one. I think the first one.
I think the first one probably is the best one, but I did like the Italy one as well. Spain I didn't like quite as much, but I'll rewatch them all. Greece is being released at the moment. This film is just not very funny, and it doesn't commit to a tone because, on the one hand, it's kind of a parody, a very broad one because he's wearing these kind of, he's got whitened teeth. I'm imagining he's wearing some kind of, dentures or prosthetic for the film, but he's got very silly white feet and white teeth and a tan, and that looks like a broad parody. And you got Isla Fisher as his estranged wife, and she's got some talent, but she's not a subtle actress. She appears playing things very broad most of the time. But then you've got real life graphics towards the end about conditions for workers in the Middle East, Indian, Sri Lankan sort of part of the world actually. And so you think, is this meant to be a hard-hitting expose? Is it meant to be kind of an office-type fly-on-the-wall documentary? Because you've got David Mitchell there, who's probably the best thing in the film, doing like an authorised biography. So he's interviewing people about this guy. And then you've got flashbacks to when he was in front of a parliamentary committee. And then it does that thing that The Big Short does of trying to explain how a certain not criminal, but unethical mechanism works. So the film explains to us how he goes into a company and manages to enrich himself whilst plunging it into a load of leveraged debt. And that's very like The Big Short. So it's just a mixed bag, and worst of all, it's not funny. And there are all people in it that are great in other things, like Tim Key's in it, sidekick Simon from the Alan Partridge universe.
Yeah.
And there's meant to be a lot of them building this feature for his 60th birthday in Mykonos. Well, firstly, I know he's not that far away, but Steve Coogan in no way looks 60. So that's all a bit odd. And he's clearly got an obsession with the film Gladiator, but not enough humour's mined from it. So that's all on the cutting room floor. And then you've got a troubled relationship with his oldest son, who's played by Asa Butterfield. I think that's his name, isn't it? The one who was in Hugo and all that as a younger kid. But that's not really explored properly. And so he's wasted, and he's too big a name to be wasted. So it's a bit all over the shop. It was quite a strange run because, of course, you had Oscar season where I saw a run of pretty good films, and then I've just had a run of terrible films before onward. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been an odd season really because it's been a bit shit. I mean, Birds of Prey was like the only one, and that was
Birds
a
of
bit of a
Prey was
letdown.
the sort of non-summer tentpole, wasn't it? If you
Yeah,
like.
I mean, you had Bad Boys for Life, which was turned out
But
pretty decent.
yeah, Bad Boys was on a similar sort of standard to me as like The Gentleman, which was the first film I saw this year.
Oh
Like
yeah, I think it was similar for me. What do you think of that?
The Gentleman was, if you'd have forced me at gunpoint to write a review the moment I came out of it, it would have been like Guy Ritchie's best film in years and funny and fresh and everything like that. But I didn't write it for a couple of days. And a couple of days later, I'd almost forgotten the film. It was like, it was the Chinese meal of cinema. It just, and Bad Boys for Life was a bit like that. It was like entertaining way to spend, it's damning it with faint praise. It was an entertaining way to spend a couple of hours. Hugh Grant was brilliant in it. Charlie Hunnam gets a lot of shit, but I thought he was really good in it. And the conversation, it being anchored around this narration from Hugh Grant, and occasionally batshit things happening in the story because he's got bored and decided to pep it up a bit. And then occasionally you'll either demand food or make a pass at Charlie Hunnam. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't stay with me.
Yeah.
A couple of days later, I had a visitor. What did you think of it? Tell me about the...
I think I enjoyed my time with it, but walking out, I thought it's Guy Ritchie being really, really fucking pretentious. I don't think it would had much. I think it was very much look at me, aren't I self-referencing that I'm in the movie? But what was left with it was just pretty much like it felt kind of like exactly what he did with what was that one, Rock'n'Roller? It was like I'm going to set up a sequel to a film which I'm never going to see.
One of the handful I've not seen, Rock'n'Roller.
Yeah.
Because it came out to pretty toxic reviews, and that was the knock on it, that it was pretentious. It was impenetrable and pretentious. Well, The Gentleman was quite light and funny, but yeah.
It was kind of, I mean, I didn't think... I think Rock'n'Roller was as pretentious as, say, like, The Gentleman was. But, right. Yeah, I think the main problem was you had like Matthew McConaughey as the lead, but you didn't really follow him. He was.
It wasn't his film at all. It was Charlie Hunnam's film.
Yeah, but it felt very totally confused because it's like, well, he is on paper is your lead, but the film's kind of like tells you more about him, and it kind of like follows him from behind. But Charlie Hunnam isn't in it enough to be the lead.
Yeah, and we learn virtually nothing about him other than he's good at his job and loyal.
And
Hugh Grant is basically feature-length comic relief, although he's very, very good. I like this Hugh Grant we're getting in recent years. He's aged out of playing the romantic lead. Not that you couldn't have a romantic comedy with people in their 50s. There's been nothing wrong with that at all. But he's aged out of wanting to play them as much as anything else. And so he's doing things that he wants to do rather than as some sort of career path. And so you sense that he's really enjoying it. And he was just chewing the scenery here, but in the best possible way.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. It's a last year film, but right after that, because I had a visitor, I took him to the cinema a couple of times, and one was The Gentleman, and I took him to see Knives Out again because he hadn't seen it. And that was a film you didn't like as much as I did.
No, I mean, I wasn't too... I mean, I'm not saying I didn't dislike it, I didn't walk out thinking that's absolutely fucking dog shit or anything like that. I walked out thinking, but yeah, it was alright. I just did not get, like, the overwhelming praise of brilliance. Because it just... Yeah. I don't know, I think it was mostly down to the fact that it's sold...
Was it overhyped?
It's possibly. But I think what mostly was I think it was kind of sold out as, like, a whodunit. And it wasn't really like a whodunit, and
well, it kind of was because
it was.
What I found clever about the film is what you found annoying about the film, in that you're told who did it about 20 minutes in. I think I can't remember now because it's been a while. I mean, I could write down the main beats of the plot, but I can't remember exactly how far in we learn that it's the person. But then the film goes to great lengths to tell you how everything you've seen is accurate, but she's not guilty in that way. And I think that's a very clever spin on that kind of film.
Right. Okay. So it's a bit more of a like a different way of looking at it rather than like. But
It's not
yeah,
it's not a 2 hour film in which the mystery's done in like quarter of an hour, 20 minutes.
yeah,
It's a 2 hour film where we get an answer 20 minutes in that we think, well, that must be wrong. But we've seen it. We've objectively seen what happened. But there's 2 hours left. So we're going to find that that's not right, or she's misunderstood. And actually, we find out it was right, but it wasn't.
yeah.
And everyone in it's great. It does evoke, if you go back and look at like Murder on the Orient Express and things like that, the 70s version, and look at the cast those films had. And that's what he's gone for here. A-list would be stretching it, but everyone in it's a name. Almost everyone in it. I mean, literally, the housekeeper, I think, might have been the only person I didn't recognise. Chris Evans is just great at it. And the guy's not aging. You'd still buy he was like 26, even though he's quite close to 40. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's potentially a star, Ana de Ramos. In that, when I watched the film, I thought she's too young to be a bongo because of how she looks in that particular film. But you look her up and realise she's like 31, 32. And actually, in Bond, she looks far more like that age. It was just the way they made her up in that particular thing. But you got Don Johnson, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, Christopher Plummer, all really, really high quality.
Not Kevin Spacey.
Not Kevin Spacey. And others I probably have just forgotten off the top of my head. Frank Oz has like an extended cameo in it. And I just thought it was outstanding. I thought it was outstanding. The person I saw it with actually had a rewatch last week because they came out a bit like you. They liked it just fine. And they rewatched it last week and they're like, oh, that's grown on me. Watching it again, knowing the mechanics of it, it's grown on me. And they've greenlit a sequel. So, I mean, Daniel Craig's brilliant in it. He just even moves differently in it. He's an actor. He's not a character. He's an actor. I mean, the accent is ludicrous, and I think it's meant to be, but he even moves different.
I enjoyed the accent. I enjoyed like the sort of like the idea of his character.
Yeah.
And things like I think it was just more of a case of just how it was just more set up because I think, a good old murder mystery.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, so you're telling me
you've just told us, and that wasn't inaccurate. You're right. What we're told 20 minutes in is right. It's just not the full story.
Well, I guess to me, or at least on first watch, it felt very meandering. Yeah. I was like, where are you going? And the sort of supposedly bad guy. Okay, well, the obvious one is the arsehole, and then you try and sort of like trying to think, well, it's probably obviously not going to be the arsehole. Oh, it is the arsehole. Well, that's not really that interesting then, is it, really? I would have been more, it would have been more like surprising if you chose someone else first to a degree. But, okay, fine. I guess the other thing I had issue with it, I thought, despite the great cast it had, it didn't utilise them as well. It was all hankered around I
disagree only in one regard. In that, could they have had more screen time? Possibly. Could we have learnt more about them? Possibly. I think there was a lot of subtlety in, say, the relationship between Don Johnson and his wife, Jamie Lee Curtis, because even little things like the way when they talk to Marta, Don Johnson continually gets nationality wrong and he's inconsistent with it and things like that, and so on. But actually, the way the film sets up is we get the quickest character studies I've ever seen because we have them all in the chair answering the same questions intercut. And it actually tells you everything you need to know about them quickly. It's quite impressive because they all adopt a different approach to what they're doing. I liked it a lot, but I mean, nothing's for everybody, is it?
No. Especially Ryan Johnson. I mean, imagine Ryan Johnson being the divisive filmmaker.
Yeah, I wrote 2 5-star reviews on the same weekend because it was that and The Irishman when I first saw them.
Yeah.
But I actually rewatched it. I think I've only ever given about 4 or 5-star reviews ever for film. One was Stan and Ollie last year. No, I'm a few more than that because I did give one to Avengers Endgame. I did give one to The Irishman. I did give one to Knives Out, and I gave one to 1917.
which was great. I loved
Yeah,
1917.
I think it was your favourite of the Oscar nominees, wasn't it?
Right, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember now. What was it? It was 1917.
Well, there were a few that were really odd. It was Parasite, 1917, Once Upon a Time in America, The
That was
Irishman,
it.
Ford versus Ferrari, Marriage
Yeah,
Story.
I've not seen Ford vs Ferrari or Marriage
I've seen
Story
I've
for that,
seen all
but
nine. I'll look them up for you actually. I've seen all nine. There were nine this year, and I saw all of them. I didn't see everything nominated in every category, but I did see a couple. Like I saw Two Popes, which had um, Anthony Hopkins and
I'm the
Jonathan
Pope.
Price
Hey!
and the right. We have Ford versus Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I've seen all of those.
Yeah,
The ones that really
I've seen
surprised,
everything.
I've seen everything. Even before the Ferrari driver could get his knickers back on.
It's silly.
um,
I've seen everything.
yeah, they're not just Little Women; they're Little Women with bits. Um, the Ford versus Ferrari being on there surprised me because it's very much more a popcorn flick. Now, America has a love affair with the car and nostalgia and its own history. So, on that basis, maybe. I really liked it. I thought it was a really good film. It's just not the sort of thing you'd expect to see nominated.
Yeah,
The Irishman I thought was outstanding. I watched it twice in 2 nights at 3.5 hours, so I liked it. Jojo Rabbit, I thought Scarlett Johansson was really good in it. Actually, it was probably sort of the better acting performance from her. But there's something about me and Taika Waititi. I like him and I want him to have money, and I think he's a better writer than director, as all the foreshadowing of jokes in Thor Ragnarok showed. But I couldn't warm to Jojo Rabbit at all. I thought it was just fine.
yeah,
Well, my website did films of the decade for the last decade, even though we got it for this year. And Jojo Rabbit somehow made it onto that list, because it's not released in this country till this decade, but also I just struggle to see it as one of the top 20 films of the last sort of 10 years. It's going to struggle to be in my top 10 for this year.
yeah.
I like it that much. Joker, I just thought was a very, very good performance in an okay film that desperately wanted to be Taxi Driver or The King of Comedy. Little Women is the first version of Little Women I've ever seen, so I've got nothing to compare it to. But it's obviously it's the one that isn't told sequentially. Apparently, they normally are chronologically told. I liked it. I thought that change of structure gave it something. Marriage Story, I thought was a TV film with the great performances. It's a bit like Erin Brockovich in that regard, in that Erin Brockovich had like Albert Finney and Julia Roberts doing really great A-list Hollywood work in a film that should have been on TV starring Cheryl Ladd. And I thought Marriage Story was a little bit like that. Actually, the two lead performances are extraordinary, but it's not a Best Picture contender. It just really isn't. And then 1917 and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I loved both of. So there were about 4 on the list that I would have been like, as far as I care, any one of those 4 wouldn't bother me. And those 4 would have been The Irishman, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite, which did win.
Yeah. Which was a surprise. It was like, oh shit, Parasite won.
Yeah, they normally just make do with the best foreign language film, don't they? And I thought it would as well. I saw it 2 days before the ceremony, so I was on team sort of 1917 really. Some reactions on social media pissed me off, only in as much as nothing is for everybody. But I even saw one person calling Mendes a hack. And on the basis of that film, I don't know how you can say that. It was the one film ever that I've seen use the one take or faux one take trick where it added something and didn't come off as deeply pretentious. I famously hated Birdman, and the whole one take thing made it fucking worse because it was just, look how fucking clever I am. And I hated it. This film, I cannot imagine it being told any other way. And I bought into the reality of it to the degree that when they finally got to the end of the film, and spoiler alert on casting, at the end of the film, they see, forward on 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this, they see Benedict Cumberbatch. And I thought, fucking hell, Benedict Cumberbatch had to stand there for hours waiting for them. And I thought, no, you dick, it's not real time. It's faux real time, and it's a film, you pillock. I thought it really drew out the differences between the two boys, or men really, but they're boys really, very subtly without being too on the nose, one of them being super keen and the other one being super cynical or anything like that. I thought it was absolutely outstanding. I was really pleased that Roger Deakins won, only in as much as we've made this mistake in the past of referring to a film as having great cinematography because it's pretty. And in fact, I've even seen it on social media where they go, look at the cinematography in this and pose and put in still photos. Well, still photos by definition are not cinematography. That cinematography is about lens choices. It's about movement. It's so many different things. Now, when you think the choices Deakins made had to not only all match, and the level of planning he would have had to go into with Mendes, but also he's got to pick a lens that suits everything, and then block a shot so that lens works. Because you can't use anything too close in, you can't use anything long range, and you can't be swapping lenses because the hidden cuts will look different. So it really is quite an extraordinary piece of work. I actually thought, I saw Parasite 2 days before, and I thought, right, I think Parasite is the best picture. Very subjectively, but I think Parasite is the best picture. I think that's a few times a decade level of film. But I thought the prize would be split. I thought Mendes would take sheer logistics of this film. I don't know what you thought.
It's hard. I mean, I think for me the Oscars are never really about like who won best, what actually is the best film. It never usually is it?
No, I think what I would say is, with a few exceptions this year, I mean, Ford versus Ferrari sticks out not on its quality, on its type. Although, having said that, it's a pretty straightforward film. So, I mean, it's not doing anything that amazing. It's a popcorn flick, but a very, very good one. And Marriage Story aside, because I don't think... I'm sorry to anyone who enjoyed it, but it doesn't fucking belong there. In my view, anything I say is just my opinion, obviously. So fine if you liked it. And the performances were terrific. And a lot of people said Laura Dern won for the wrong film. She did not. Laura Dern won for the right film. She was outstanding in Marriage Story.
Why? Oh, right.
She was in Little Women.
Oh, right, okay.
She wasn't nominated for Little Women, I don't think, but she was in it. And a lot of people said that was the better performance, and I don't agree. I think she absolutely burned the screen up in Marriage Story. But beyond that, though, they normally, allowing for the fact there are types of films they don't nominate, the nominations are normally a good spread of like the prestige pictures of a year. So I think quite often the nominations are broadly correct. But obviously then picking the best from that is much more hit and miss, and they get that wrong, probably more wrong than they get it right. Now, who am I to say that? Actually, history judges that, because if you look at the films that stick in people's minds, still get talked about and become classics, it ain't Driving Miss Daisy.
It ain't Ordinary People, is it?
It ain't Ordinary People. It's Raging Bull and Goodfellas and that sort of thing. It's, yeah, you know, and some years it's less clear cut. I don't think Birdman's a great film, but that's just my opinion.
Well, who's talking about Birdman these days? Honestly, like, you know, who really is?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand that. Green Book I really, really liked, but I would probably say Black Klansman was probably the best of that lot. A lot of people would say one of the other ones. Roma nearly sent me to fucking sleep.
Yeah.
I didn't like that film at all. But it isn't just about me and my tastes. But I think objectively, Green Book isn't the film that'll last, even though it might be the one after Black Klansman I enjoyed most.
Probably more... I mean, I haven't seen Black Klansman, but I think it's probably...
Black Klansman's great.
Speak to a broader audience more. Do you know what I mean? I think that's something that, like, sort of... That...
It's feel good. It is to, like, the road trip film a bit like something like Shawshank is to the prison film.
Yeah. And
that it's feel good in what is not inherently a feel good subject. Being in prison is not feel good. He's actually raped in prison. Racism is not a feel good subject, but they've managed to make a sepia-toned, fairly feel-good film out of it. Now, you could argue that's in bad taste. But, Moonlight might have been the best film of its year, although possibly Hacksaw Ridge, but it was probably...
Not really. I don't think so. I don't think Moonlight was particularly great.
Yeah, okay. I would. There were films I preferred that year, though. But when you think La La Land was its big competition that year, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Of all of them, no, neither of them, to be honest. The year before Spotlight won, I had no problems with that. Although there are a couple of other films on, and so you go on going through, the years. Occasionally you get a really big omission, either be it film or acting performance. I still don't believe Tom Hanks wasn't nominated for Captain Phillips. Because that was probably the best performance of his career.
Yeah.
And he's won 2 Oscars for lesser performances.
But what did he win his Oscars for? He won his Oscars for playing a guy with AIDS and
Philadelphia
a disadvantage.
Yeah. And Forrest Gump is it's quite a nice film in its way, but it's a really broad performance.
Well, it's just like the thing in Tropic Thunder, isn't it? Don't never go full retard.
I mean, I've got less of a problem with the Forrest Gump one than I almost have with Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is exactly in line with what we've just been talking about. It's kind of a TV film. I don't really think it's that good. I think it makes a couple of decisions that, in that era, would have made audiences less sympathetic to the character, and I think it's one of those that he won because he lost a lot of weight and it was an issues film. Whereas Forrest Gump winning, less his acting performance, but winning, well, we know how nostalgic America is, and Forrest Gump was like a different way to look at modern American history. So I think that was always going to do well against a very adult film in Pulp Fiction. So, although, The Shawshank Redemption is probably... along with, has probably lasted as well as either of them, and it won fuck all.
Yeah.
So you never know. You never know how these things are going to turn out. But yeah, it wasn't a bad list this year. There was certainly half of them would appear most years. Parasite, 1917, The Irishman, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those are films that would be nominated in pretty much any year you release them. Now that there's 8, 9, 10 nominees. So it wasn't a bad list. There were a couple of shocks on there, but I did think Parasite was the best film, but I thought 1917 was the best made film.
Yeah,
so I thought we were going to get a split between director and film, but we didn't. And that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to comprehend Parasite myself. I did like it. I thought it was actually really good, really, really interesting. But what was your thoughts on it? What's your main take on it?
I just immediately it had me instantly. Because it's got everything. It's a bit of a caper film. Inadvertently, there's almost action in it. There's tension in it. The sheer fucking brass neck of what this family are trying to do.
Yeah.
Just the whole pretending to be somebody else and not related to ingratiate themselves with this family. The way they get the housekeeper dismissed is really funny. Then it goes really dark in places, what they do to the housekeeper and her husband.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminded me of a feature-length version of Inside Number 9. It sounds like something like that would do, really obscure.
As a plot description.
As in terms of what happens, in terms of what how things rise up and how things change. They eventually sort of get everyone fired, and the housekeeper's got something dark secret as well.
Yeah,
and then
it's a jet black comedy.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic. I had such a great time with it. Now, it's one of those I had to get rip off because until it won, it wasn't appearing in any fucking cinemas. And I was 2 days before the Oscars. I was 2 away from having seen all the nominees. I hadn't seen Little Women or Parasite, so I sat and watched them back to back at home. The other film I did that with was A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, because again, our release of it kept getting pushed. It's I'm not waiting till 3 or 4 weeks after the Oscars. So I saw A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood that way as well, the Mr. Rogers film. Although I preferred the documentary, the one on Netflix. There's Will You Be My Neighbor?
Yeah.
Or Won't You Be My Neighbor? One of the two. Will You Be My Neighbor, I think. On Netflix is the documentary about him. And I recommend to anyone who's not American doing that first. Because you're not anchored to the character if you just go straight to the film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
have
it
that
really
sense of
helps.
who he is.
And it's quite tear-jerking in itself. The documentary, but what this man clearly meant to be. I dated an American years ago. It's in the time since I've known you, Chris. You know who I'm on about. You're friends with her on Netflix. On Netflix. What did I say? On Netflix, on Facebook, and so on my stuff.
On Netbook,
that person,
on Faceflix.
That person grew up loving Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
I remember her talking about him years ago, and I'd never heard of him. So I thought of her when these films came out, and that sort of thing. But we don't have that over here.
It's something like that, sort of like proper good, wholesome guy who is genuine.
It's PBS, so it's the same people that make, well, the same station, I suppose, that makes Sesame Street. And the way it's been described is Sesame Street was about developing a child's numeracy and literacy. So when you watch Sesame Street, they'll have a number and a letter.
1, 2, 5, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, I remember that song. Yeah. That was the show that would have been showing when me and Chris were a certain age. Whereas Mr. Rogers was meant to be much more about character development and feelings and the person. So they were meant to be sort of almost complementary. And so, kids grew up, when he did his job well, they grew up feeling valued because of the work he was doing. And the documentary shows it. And Tom Hanks is a good casting choice, although he's not really doing an impression. It's an approximation of him. And but the documentary did more for me than the fiction, the film, which is loosely based on an article written in the late 90s about him. So Mr. Rogers died in about 2003, I think. And he was only about 75. I think he had stomach cancer or something like that. So when he was about 70 or late 60s, one of the two, this guy from whichever magazine it was, Esquire or something like that, shadowed him and did an article. And that person is played by Matthew, can't remember his surname, the guy who's in married to Kerry Russell and is in The Americans, the Welsh actor, although he's not playing it Welsh. Take heed, Robert Downey Jr. And
because seriously, not even Welsh actors do Welsh accents in their films.
I know. It wasn't that wildly accurate. I mean, it was instantly recognisable as Welsh. It's not like Marty McFly in Back to the Future 3, playing Irish, Michael J. Fox doing a really bad Irish accent or something. It's not that bad, but it's not good.
I'll buy a hat.
I imagine if you are Welsh, it sounds awful.
Yeah.
As I'm not Welsh, I recognise that as Welsh, but it doesn't kind of sound right to me. But I'm not quite sure how. Not good. But so it's a good film, but it's only focusing on a couple of months of that guy's life. It sort of shows you why he's special, kind of. But the documentary was more career long, and there's a real warmth and intelligence in that guy's eyes when you see him, and you could see that he totally believed in what he was doing. As an aside, I have watched. He did I don't know if you would call it a Senate hearing or testimony to Congress. I forget when you would what you would call it, but he went into Congress and was sort of grilled, and it was about PBS funding, which whoever the president at the time was, I can't remember if it was Johnson or Nixon. I think it might have been Nixon at this point. It was Nixon. Nixon was talking about pulling the funding, and Mr. Rogers' performance in Fred Rogers, wasn't it? Fred Rogers' performance was so strong in Congress that they kept the funding. And I have gone and watched that, and there's a real warmth and intelligence to the man. So I would recommend that. But the spin-off film is good. But again, even with Tom Hanks in it, there's something a bit TV film about it. But then that seems to have been a bit of a catchphrase tonight.
Yeah, so, I've noticed that quite a lot, especially with Netflix as well. I mean, a lot of the Netflix stuff does seem to feel very TV-ish.
Yeah, The Irishman doesn't, because Martin Scorsese just doesn't make things that look and feel that way. But that's more about that filmmaker. He's effectively made sort of it's sort of Goodfellas, The Next Generation. And what I mean by that is if you watch Goodfellas, when we stop following Henry Hill at the end of that film, if you go and look the man up, because he was a real guy, obviously, we stop following him when he's about 37. So what we don't get that we get from The Irishman is the sort of the fading of the body and how it leads you to look back and start evaluating how you've lived your life. Yeah. And people towards the end of their life sometimes repent, and stuff like that. And that's what The Irishman is. It's a lament almost. It's a film only a 70-something would be likely to make, but it's got all the same sort of energy that went into like a Goodfellas. It's just got a different perspective. I thought it was terrific.
Yeah, I haven't finished The Irishman, so I can't really say too much on it. But then my viewing habits have just gone absolutely shot recently. So...
What I would say to anybody is there was a lot of snobbery on social media. Again, it's because that's the way people are on there. Do you know what I would get? I would pay a subscription fee not to be lectured to. Not for people to tell me how to vote, how to feel, and all that kind of stuff. Tell me how you do, by all means, but and there was a lot of lecturing because somebody came up with a way to watch The Irishman as effectively a mini series. They said, look, if you haven't got 3.5 hours, watch the first 49 minutes and stop when this happens. And it broke it down into 4 pieces. And the shit he got for that was ridiculous, because my attitude was the number of people I spoke to who don't watch 3.5-hour films. We rarely watch 3.5-hour films, although I'm not daunted to. Having said that, I'm more daunted to do it at home because my concentration is better in a cinema. I don't have distractions. I watched it the first night I watched it. I say I watched it twice in 2 nights. That's not quite true. I watched it twice in 3 nights because I wasn't sure. I was writing a review for it and I didn't know if I'd have enough time the following night to watch all of it. So I watched 50 minutes or so to ensure I had enough time the next night. And then having done that, I thought I owe it to myself and the film to watch it in one hit, which I then did. Hence, I watched it the next day as well. But the number of people I spoke to recommending The Irishman, but then I always felt the need to warn them it was 3.5 hours long. And judging by their faces, I would almost reflexively say, break it down into chunks. I would rather people watched it in a way they were comfortable with than didn't watch it. And a lot of people won't watch those sorts of things. I feel sort of the same way as I do about like dubbing and subtitles. It's like, well, if you struggle with subtitles and there's a dubbing option, watch it. I don't think it's optimum, but at the same time, it's not optimum to be trying to read when there's stuff going on the screen either. But what you're getting is the actor's performance. So I think subtitles are better. But I just think the snobbery is ridiculous. To anyone listening, if you look at the Irishman and you see 209 minutes, watch it however you fucking want. You won't lose that much.
Well, it's just preference now, isn't it, really? It's like, well, that's not cinema. And it's like, well, no, it's a film and you watch it at home, and some people, like to take,
breaks,
yeah.
You're not supposed to be sat on your phone and popping off to make cups of tea, but I'm sure you fucking do when you're at home.
Oh, yeah.
So do what you want. Do what you're comfortable with.
But,
that kind of annoyed me.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just that lecturing, talking down to people that you are the person in the world that understands film better than everyone else, and the way you do it is the only way. Like, watch it however you want.
Like, hearing the fact that this guy's done it, I'm kind of interested to hear, because I'd actually quite like to know, because that might help me. Might break it up.
Just search something like The Irishman as a mini-series. He tweeted it, and he literally points out 3 different points where you would stop each episode, and it puts you in for like 50 minutes a time.
Because some people don't always have that, do they? Especially during the week.
That's it.
Because they work, and
people work. People have kids. Kids might not go to bed till, particularly older kids, might not go to bed till 8, 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then you haven't got the time. And let's be honest, yes, film running times in popcorn cinema have got longer, in that the number of blockbusters now that are, 2.5 hours or whatever. That's grown, but 3.5 hours is still a stretch. That's the longest mainstream film in decades.
Mm.
I can't think what it's the longest since. I did read it somewhere.
I mean, not even Bond's going to be that long. The new
No,
Bond.
Bond's going to be a similar length to something like The Dark Knight Rises or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and they're long films in and of themselves. But Endgame was over 3 hours, and you got a lot of that. Well, you managed with Endgame, and it's like, yeah, but you were in a cinema, and B, this is longer. This is another half an hour again.
Yeah, but you take your kids though.
And you take your kids. So I just think, who the fuck do you think you are to tell, not you, just people talking like this, who the fuck do you think you are to lecture people on how they can watch things? Even what I'm saying now is only an opinion. I'm saying I think you can break it down, but it's just an opinion. Scorsese himself was asked about it, and he said, well, it's optimum to watch it in one because the film is about the accumulation of detail, which obviously you'll lose a little bit if you watch on separate nights because you'll forget the odd bit and stuff like that. But purely for getting through the plot, it's absolutely fine. And the last sort of section of the film feels almost like a coda of its own anyway. So it's a very, very well-made film, as you would expect. The performances are awesome, but just the ravages of age on them as well, because everyone's talked about the effect of de-aging and whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. But there's an aging effect as well. I mean, the last time you see Joe Pesci, for example, he doesn't look like that yet. They aged them beyond where they are now.
Yeah.
That effect actually looks better than the de-aging. And just the physiques of the guy, I mean, one of them, I won't say which, is impaired by a stroke. I won't give away which if you haven't seen it, but one of them gets impaired by a stroke. And it's just perfect stroke acting. It's just the way they're holding themselves. I thought it was a magnificent film. Nothing's for everybody, but if you enjoyed Goodfellas and you enjoyed Casino, it's likely you'll enjoy this.
One of the things I did notice, though, with the de-aging thing, it felt like De Niro was already 50, though, and I was a bit confused with that. And is he supposed to be kind of oldish already, or
sometimes what they couldn't do, because he doesn't look like he did in Mean Streets.
Yeah,
go back and watch Mean Streets. He's always got quite a face full of character, but he did look very young. Even as late as something like Raging Bull, and he was quite slim, particularly in most of Raging Bull. Obviously, he bulked up for it, but he was playing a boxer for a lot of that film, so he was only 11 stone something. What they've been in this film, I watched it go straight. If you watch it on Netflix, it's likely, I don't know if it still does, but when the film released, it takes you straight. If you leave it running and you've got it to autoplay, it goes straight into a making of conversation that's about 25 minutes long, and it's the four of them sat in a restaurant booth effectively. So it's De Niro, Pesci, Pacino, and Scorsese, not in that order as you go around the table, but Scorsese's kind of in the middle. And they talk about the film, and actually some of what you couldn't get away from, but they tried, was that their bodies are aging. So a 70-year-old doesn't walk like a 30-year-old, even if they're in really good health. So, I mean, I thought that was one of the, just as an aside, I thought that was one of the cleverest things about Russell Crowe all those years ago in The Insider, because he was 35 playing a 53-year-old, and the differences between a 35 and a fit 53-year-old are really subtle, but he convinced me he was 53.
Yeah.
Really subtle, that he should have won an Oscar for that film rather than Gladiator, in my view, but there you go. Anyway, this film, they talk and they have a laugh about it. There's a bit where Al Pacino is sat round his TV with some of his family or whatever. I can't remember if it's when Kennedy's shot or something, but anyway, he gets out of his chair, and when they were filming it, someone just leant into Scorsese and went, "Remember, he's meant to be 48." And what they're saying is, Al, you just got up like a 72-year-old or whatever he is. I think he's older than that. I think he's 78. And that was the point, that they kept having to do little bits faster. And when they'd walk up some stairs, they'd have to be cognizant of it. And by and large, they did okay. If you can just give it a little bit, that they're clearly not 70, but they're probably not 30 either. The only time it really shows up is there's a bit where De Niro kicks the shit out of someone on the street, and that does look like an old man shadow boxing. That looks really naff. A peak era De Niro would not have looked that bad. But by and large, they did a reasonable job. The de-aging looked all right. The aging looked better. We're never given a year. I mean, obviously, when you get a flashback to World War II, I think it is, that's obviously World War II. But we're fashions and what's going on in the world and music choices tell us when we are. You never get it flash up on the screen June 1963 or whatever. So you are encouraged to accept that time is passing and they're changing in appearance. But what you're not needing to do is call up Wikipedia and go, hang on, he was 33 at that point. Don't worry about it. He looks younger. Later on, he looks a bit older.
Yeah.
The worst bit of the de-aging is I think they put... Because people's eyes look a bit different as they get older. For a real example of that, go and look up the woman who played Beverly Crusher in the Star Trek films. Her eyes just visibly change as she got older. They look a bit more glassier now. But they use contacts in the younger De Niro. And I could tell instantly there were contacts even on the small screen at home. But yeah, I really love The Irishman. What else have we seen since we last recorded? Anything since summer?
I know the recent amount of releases haven't been particularly great, but have you seen the Invisible Man?
Yeah, I saw it yesterday, and it's really not my genre. So I found it quite difficult to watch, actually.
Really?
No, because it's scary. I just think it's the whole kind of domestic violence angle to it. The way that woman played Fear was phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
Elizabeth Moss is in it. For anyone who hasn't seen any artwork or trailers for this film, which is unlikely because it is up on billboards and stuff like that now, and bus shelters and so on. Elizabeth Moss is the lead in this film. She is best known for Mad Men and The Handmaid's Tale. She was also Jeb Bartlett's daughter in The West Wing when she was a lot younger, when she was like 17, 18, 19, that sort of age. She's about late 30s now. I think she was born in about 82, so she'd been about 37 filming this. And she plays like a victim of domestic violence, and the fear in her is quite a difficult thing to show. Terror to that degree is different. You think in some horror films when they've got to scream and run, that's the thin end of the wedge. It's that kind of involuntary shaking and essaying being genuinely freaked by something quite small. That's all really incredible. She was absolutely magnificent in this film, and again, it's a vanity-free performance. It really is, because she looks everything from great to shit in this film, depending on where she is and when it is. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on your point, like, it's only like it from the very early stages where she's like staying at a friend's house, and that she's he's trying to like get her to go outside, because she's come very much recluse.
Yeah, she gets as far as the mailbox, and then somebody's jogging.
Yeah, and she just like she's like, oh my god, like someone's coming for me. It's just like it just sells you completely.
Well, even when she's leaving the house, I mean, her breathing is unsettled, and it's a bit like I don't know, if you get in with a car with someone who's literally just passed their driving test, and it's the first time they're driving on their own, and they breathe just through the mouth because they're still really nervous. It's that kind of thing, but it's shot through with just a complete skittishness of what she's doing, and there's a hurry, and and the way they shoot him running at the car in the end, it's so low key but so effective. Doesn't waste a lot of shots in this. It's a very well directed film. Definitely. Really really good reimagining of like the idea, isn't it? Of doing like a more domestic kind of. Well, the Invisible Man is not the protagonist, which is obviously the case in most historic versions of that film and story. Nor is he wearing either a bandage around his head or a hat with some glasses or something. This is a domestic abuser who is very rich. Has managed has this woman as his partner in life. We don't see it pre the film, but he's clearly beaten her. The implication is raped her and all that sort of thing repeatedly. They live up in the hills with a lovely ocean view. On the face of it, she'd have a nice life, but he's clearly abusive. And the film starts with her trying
manipulative as well, like
manipulative, gaslighting, all that sort of thing. And the film starts with her trying to leave. And of course, this film has state-of-the-art cameras and a security system, and she's had to pack bags and think about it over a number of weeks and drug him and everything else. And the funny thing is, you feel like she's being chased or in danger when she actually really isn't for a lot of the scene. It's only as she's about to leave the house she sets off an alarm which clearly wakes him. But until he arrives, we see no sign she's actually being followed. But she essays fear so well that you feel like he could any minute she's going to be caught. The level of fear is incredible, and it just completely evokes what she's been through. She plays such a convincing long-term victim of domestic violence that it actually makes the film difficult to watch beyond any of the sort of jump scares in it.
Yeah, because there isn't a lot of. It's just tense more than anything, isn't it? You are kind of very wary of what's going on behind, or
the trope that it could have fallen into, and sort of does, but does it well, is in a lot of these films you get you're imagining it, you're going crazy. That sort of thing. You see it in all the kind of, I don't know if it was in The Nightmare on Elm Street, but those sorts of films where something implausible is happening, and you try to tell someone and you're painted as crazy. That film has this, and it nearly lost me, but not quite. I thought it was done very, very well.
Yeah, because you are left with, because you do sort of hang on, think of it from their perspective, from the other people's perspective, and you're thinking, well,
it sounds batshit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like you wouldn't, how would you believe it, without any discernible proof, which kind of annoys me sometimes, because when he leaves things like the mobile phone of taking pictures of her, just to kind of well, that's his phone. That's evidence. The fact that that's evidence you can show people. Say, look, I didn't take this because I'm clearly fucking sleeping in the bed. So who,
But there's also, I mean, he's obviously in her house, so in the house she's staying in. So he emails her sister as her, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
just causing absolute mayhem.
And the ultimate shock of the restaurant bit was, I won't ruin it for anyone who's not seen it, but there is a very much oh my god, and everything just goes to shit by then. But I think things get a little bit confusing towards, not confusing, but just a bit too. I'm not too sure what to make of it by the end of it, because I can't. Getting into it, I can't really sort of spoil things to a degree, but I kind of felt like it was kind of. It wasn't. It wanted to do a bit of a heroic thing, but at the same time, it wasn't kind of sure of its convictions, and I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what the film was going for.
Yeah, for all of this, I didn't love it, and I think that's why.
With the ending,
I just in general, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
What the film is going for sometimes.
Yeah.
If it's just a study of, because I almost think. Maybe I'm insulting horror when I say this, and I think everybody who's ever listened to me knows horror's not wildly my genre. But I think turning such a gut-wrenching picture of a domestic violence victim into a horror film seems almost
trivial.
Trivial. I think it trivializes it to a degree. I think Elizabeth Moss is almost too good for the film, as well made as the film is. And I think that's, to anyone listening, I mean no disrespect, because this has had 5-star reviews and all sorts. I think it says more about me and this genre than it says about the film itself. But I think it's conflated two different things and played it for almost thrills in a kind of way. And I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that. But what made me more uncomfortable is the fact that the film was trying to make me uncomfortable. It's a woman who's been through hell, and she's still going through hell. And just as she's starting to show signs of recovering, she's put back into hell. The in-camera effects are terrific. Just the little changes slightly off camera sometimes, but even right at the start of the film where breakfast burns. I mean, that you see it all happen in camera.
Yeah, no one on screen. You just sort of see.
No one's on screen, and you see the gas turn up, and then you see everything burn. You know, this is not. This is a 7 million budget film. This is not some wildly expensive CG they can afford.
And
So
yeah,
it's a film it's a film I don't want to show any disrespect to because a lot of heart and love's gone into this, and everyone in it is great. Even like Adrian, the boyfriend's brother, you know, is just you're never quite sure where you are with that guy because he seems to like hate and fear his brother, but is he in on something? You know what I mean? Yeah, it's really good.
yeah. Again, 7 million. That's all it got. All it made. Just go show what you can do with 7 million, isn't it?
It does really. It's made 98 million so far, but of course it's still on release.
So 7 million for that's.
Well, he did Upgrade, which I saw.
Yeah.
Was that last year or the year before?
It would have been last year-ish.
I didn't love, but it did seem like Venom done competently.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And the funny thing is, like, you know, the actor looks a bit like Tom Hardy as well. This is clearly a talented filmmaker. Not that I've seen a lot of his stuff because it isn't my genre. I wouldn't have seen Upgrade, but someone wanted to see it, so I was like, yes, I will go with you. But he's done like an Insidious film, which I would never have bothered with, particularly by the third chapter. I think I saw the first.
Well, he's mostly in the.
It is the genre. I think it is. I get Insidious mixed up with the other one.
Well, he's worked on all of them because he's kind of. He's done a lot of stuff with James Wan. You know, he's.
What's the one the nun's in? What's the one the nun is in? What's that genre? What's that series?
That's like the.
It's a spin-off from
The Conjuring. It's from The Conjuring. So.
Right, I get The Conjuring and Insidious mixed up.
Yeah, I think Insidious is just Insidious. I think it's four of them, but The Conjuring is like obviously you got Conjuring and then you got Annabelle and the Nun.
Right, who's the male lead in The Conjuring?
Patrick Wilson.
Right. Patrick Wilson's in Insidious. That's probably why I'm getting mixed up. That's why I get them mixed up. But one has Vera Farmiga, isn't it? And the other one's
that's Conjuring. Yeah.
Right. I don't actually think I've seen any Insidious films. Then I've seen both of the first two Conjuring films.
Yeah.
And didn't think they were anything special. But it's not my fucking genre.
But he's also done something. He's in.
He was a writer on The Mule. Oh no, but it's not that The Mule. Sorry. Okay, forget it.
He's in. I think he's in the first Saw. I think he sort of wrote the first Saw as well.
Yes, he did. I'm looking at him now. Yeah, co-written with James Wan. Yeah,
and he was actually in it. I think he was like.
He was in.
He was chained up to Carrie Ells in the first one.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can't picture him off the top of my head, but I go through his filmography. And it's all stuff I don't fucking watch.
Yeah.
I saw about 3 Saw films, and by the third one, I was like, fuck this.
Yeah.
I thought the first 2 were quite clever, but that's the other thing with horror. They do endless fucking sequels of the same thing when they're successful, and you end up with 9 installments, all but 2 are shit. It's just not my genre. It's not the way I want to feel. But it never has the effect on me I want it to have either. In that, as much as I don't want to be like scared or unsettled by things particularly, most horror films don't do it. So I end up sitting there going, "Oh, fucking grow up." But I have to say, I thought Upgrade was decent. I quite enjoyed Upgrade. I did enjoy this, but I've just got a few sort of tonal concerns with it. That it's one thing that feels flippant done in the actual overarching genre.
I enjoyed Upgrade's committed to not do a happy ending.
Yes.
It was like, no, we're going
I
this
liked
way.
It felt low budget as hell.
Yeah.
I feel like everything was in his apartment because that's the set they had. It wasn't, but that's how the film felt. When I think back on it, all I picture is his apartment.
Yeah, just fighting the guy, then fighting another guy.
Yeah, and I didn't think it was amazing. People talk like it's some hidden gem. Well, it is, in that it wasn't that widely seen. And it is better than Venom, which is more or less the same plot. But, it was a 3-star film. Let's not get fucking carried away. But I liked Upgrade just fine. This is better. This is a much, much stronger film.
Yeah.
Anchored by an extraordinary lead performance. If it was released at a different time of year and it was in a different genre, she'd be in awards consideration without question.
Yeah.
But whether they'd give anything to a horror film that was released in February, fuck knows.
Probably not.
Probably not.
But yeah, it is just as worthy performance,
it's really
award worthy than anything else, really. She was absolutely great. She carries the film. But yeah, it's done really, really well. I certainly enjoyed it for the most part. It did leave me scratching my head, especially towards the end, because as he's like going for like security guards, things like that. I'm thinking, why is he just killing them?
Yeah, because it's just become an out and out slasher now, and it's like, yeah, okay.
But he wasn't though. He was just. I'm saying
no. He was a controlling boyfriend who found a way to sort of get back at her for leaving him.
Yeah.
Or
was it?
And to fuck with her head. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah. I'd watch it again at home. I don't think I'd sit in a cinema and bother with it again. But I can see why people who are into this stuff loved it, because it's clearly a superior example of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't normally get performances like this. You don't normally get filmmaking of this quality. Just the in-camera stuff on its own shows a level of talent and planning. And everyone's good in it as well. So this is a guy who of deep talent who just happens to work in what is not really my genre.
Yeah.
If he was working in genres I like, which is most of them, let's be honest, I would be raving about the guy, I think. But because he largely works in stuff that just doesn't fucking interest me, I'm never going to go and watch Jigsaw. It's how many fucking Saw films in? And it was played out at the end of the second one, really. When that's the twist that the second one was going on sort of alongside the first one was great, and then the rest of them. I think the third film started with the one who looks like Kerry Russell, who played Joey Tribbiani's girlfriend in a few episodes of Friends. She looks a bit like an older Kerry Russell. She was in some neck brace that was going to kill her, and I was just like, I'm bored of this. I've seen 4 hours of this shit already, and I struggled through like the couple of hours of Saw 3, and I was like, this is just prurient now. There's no ideas here. It's just the only invention is ever more hideous fucking scenarios. But Invisible Man was really, really good, and it's the only film of its type I've been to see for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Talking of low budget films that sort of did, that sort of got a bit more attention than you would have expected. Did you see Ad Astra?
Yeah,
that was just outside of our sort of window of summer.
Yeah, that was basically Apocalypse Now, but in space.
In fact, I saw 2 films on the same day, and we ought to cover them both because I've just realised I thought we talked about one, but it was outside of Rambo: Last Blood and Ad Astra I saw on the same day.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, they were 2 fucking contrasting experiences. Last Blood I saw first. I'm glad I saw it first, not second, because
it's nice and short, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I thought when I saw the running time, and it is the shortest Rambo film, I think. Quite considerably the shortest Rambo film, I think, without looking. And I thought, well, they this must be really tight, and it isn't. The film starts and he's fart-assing around on his like farm or whatever it is forever, because they've got to set up the 2 new characters. We haven't seen them before. There's like kind of a guardian and her daughter-ish kind of thing. But we have to set them up, and we have to set up John Rambo's connection to them. So the film fucks around for about 15-20 minutes doing that. He's forgotten how to play Rambo, because I saw the other 4 films in the lead up. In fact, I think I definitely saw the first 2 and struggled a bit through the third and thought, oh, fuck it with the 4th. Even though I didn't dislike the 4th particularly, I thought, I'm not going to force myself to watch them all. I've reminded myself of the character and stuff. And First Blood's the only really good film in that series, as much as you might enjoy what follows. And then I watched this film, and it was almost like he was playing Rocky, but with slightly more legible, intelligible speech. It was like, that did not feel like John Rambo in any way, shape, or form. Didn't look like him either. He just maybe
where's the mullet?
Well, there was that. I mean, he's never had short hair in any of the films, so it looked more like Rocky looks now. And except they don't digitize out those silly fucking tattoos he's got now, and so he kept them covered. People like tattoos, that's up to them, but I think Stallone's look fucking ridiculous. But there you go. And he went over to Mexico to save this woman that's only just been set up for us. And one of the defining things about John Rambo is using the advantage of the territory he's in. So in the territory he's in, he makes it hostile to anyone there. And he actually walks straight into danger in this film, and that's just not John Rambo. He gets the absolute shit kicked out of him, and it's like, I thought he must have had something hidden away that would come to his rescue, and he didn't. He just got the shit kicked out of him. And then we see him recover alongside this woman who's completely wasted. I forget who the actress is now, but there's an actress in it I recognise but can't remember who it is, 6 months on. And they waste her. And then he sort of draws them back home just to sort of kill them all. Credits. I thought it was quite dreadful, actually. It didn't pull its punches on any of the violence, which I liked. You know, I just thought, well, at least they've still committed to making this R-rated. But I don't know why this film exists. I really don't. I mean, the obvious answer is money, of course. That's why all films exist. But I thought they must... Again, it was a bit like when I watched Jason Bourne 4 years ago. If they're bringing it back now, they must have an idea. And it's just almost like what happens is he'll try and do something different. It doesn't work that well. And then he cycles through all the characters he knows. And then eventually tries to do something again, and that doesn't really work. And then he'll do another cycle through the characters we know. Because Rambo films always come out fairly near Rocky films. And up until Rocky Balboa, there hadn't been a Rambo film or a Rocky film for a very long time. And after he brought Rocky back, he went, right, let's do Rambo. And he did the fourth Rambo film. I don't know why this film existed. I thought it was really, really poor.
It was a missed opportunity. I think there was something in it. There was something to do with like a last final send off Rambo. I mean, I think you could have said the fourth one was a decent way with him coming home.
Yes, but I liked that last shot where he just set eyes on his home for the first time, and the audiences as well. We'd never seen where Rambo was from. He was always out on the road or abroad.
So it was a nice way, but then there was something sort of quite cool of it being called Last Blood. Yeah. And it was a very nice sort of way to sort of, let's have a little bit of a epilogue. So, yeah,
yeah. I mean, it could have been good. The other thing I really struggled with is I don't think it's that well made. Just in that the action's not that good, although it's violent. I mean, the bit where he reaches into someone's and pulls someone's collarbone out through their skin is extraordinary. I thought, oh, Christ, they really aren't pulling any punches here. But at the end, it doesn't effectively set up how many people he needs to kill. So there's no effect of a countdown. There's no sense of pacing through the scene. We have no idea, even roughly, how long there might be left in this scene or how many more people are left. If we thought it was 12 and there was a hidden 13th we didn't spot, that would be one thing. But at any given point, I can't tell you if there's 1 minute left in the scene or another 6 or 7. And that's a flaw because it just drains the thing of tension, because after a few minutes you just stop caring because you go, I don't even know how long this has got left on it. So disappointing. It was also a bit odd that this guy who's now seemingly come to terms with his past has built a complex tunnel like he's still in Vietnam or something. And then lets the girl have a birthday party down there just to establish this thing he's going to use later. I didn't like it very much. Yeah. I came out of that and walked straight into Ad Astra, which Apocalypse Now in space.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I sat through it thinking, like, this is very Apocalypse Now-ish, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you start reading reviews, which I swear I only saw after I saw it.
Yeah.
And after I wrote my own review, because I was down. That was it. I went to see it and said, I'll review it if you like. In fact, I'll review both. And I did. And I gave it a pretty good review. Not great. I think I have a feeling I might have given it 3 stars. But I referenced Apocalypse Now, and then I read every other review that referenced it as well, and I was like, oh, okay, I, I'm not that much of a visionary thinker then, because everyone else has spotted what is blatantly right in front of your face. It's shot. It reminded me of a film I saw years ago with Jack Nicholson called About Schmidt. Not in plot or anything like that, just in the way they shot it. Because if you watch About Smith, which is this guy who retires, and the camera is about 2 feet from his face at every single point in the film, which makes it a bit of an acting masterclass because it's just on Nicholson at all times, and everything he feels, reacts to is shown. And I thought that of Brad Pitt, and I just thought how far this guy's come in 20 odd years. Because when I go back and watch something like 12 Monkeys, where he got a bit of praise for that. It was like, oh, he's great as this mad character. And I thought he was dreadful. I've met a few people with mental health issues. I've got some minor ones myself. And they're not really like that. It was like almost a comedic take on being a bit mad.
Yeah.
It was just, he might as well have been slapping his face like fucking Martin Riggs or something, making funny noises. I didn't like him. And I never thought he was a very good actor. And when I watched him in like Seven, I just thought he was a void on the screen. I thought he was actually really bad in that film. I've only ever seen Seven once. That's the caveat. I saw it at the cinema, admired it, didn't really like it, never watched it again. It's one of my least favourite David Fincher films, but I know I'm in a minority on that one.
Christopher Plummer's great as a killer, though.
Christopher Plummer, yeah, brilliant. Such left field casting as well. I'm sure it was somebody. Yeah, if I watched it now, it'd be Christopher Plummer, wouldn't it? I thought the film was just plodding and pedestrian and took forever to go anywhere. Lots of scenes. I mean, we need to introduce the Gwyneth Paltrow character, but there's a long sort of dinner scene with them that just goes on forever and bores the living shit out of me. I didn't like the film very much, and I didn't like Brad Pitt in it. And the first film I saw him in, and I include Fight Club in this, the first film I saw him in where I thought, yeah, you got something a bit more, was Ocean's 11, because he was just so charismatic in it. And over the years, I've just enjoyed him more and more and more. And then I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood before I saw this film, I think. Yes, before I saw this film. And he was just so effortlessly cool and commanded the screen, bags of screen presence. And then you go and see like Ad Astra, which is a 180-degree turn from it, which is a very internal character. He's good at internal anyway. He never used to be. He used to be blank when he played internal. He's now so good. He speaks in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood so much less than Leo's character, but just gets so much more out of it. And in this film, the camera's 2 feet away from his face most of the time, and he just has to wear all sorts of different evolving of his feelings. And I mean, the one scene where he loses his shit, where he's literally just, he's just in a room. He's just in a room being watched, and he actually starts to lose his calm for the first time. This is a man whose heart rate's never gone over 80, and they're monitored at all times. That's a storytelling device that allows them to do captain's log type moments where we check in with them to see how they are, because they've got to do a test. Right, so at this moment he's calm and cool. This time he's reporting being a little bit more unsettled or whatever. And it's just a masterclass, that scene. It's so tense, and he's just sat in a room. It's just his heart rate spiking a bit. It's nothing none of us have been through. It's not all of us have been through it so many times. But the film itself is plodding as hell. But he's wonderful in it. I mean, if Brad Pitt had won major awards for that film, I'd have been perfectly happy. He was great in Ad Astra.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Astra, yeah. I mean, well, First Blood. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I agree with you. It's, I mean, I enjoyed it. I think you have to go in for Last Blood as kind of like a exploitation.
I didn't expect much more than that, though.
I know, but it's not Rambo, and that's the disappointing thing. Really, it just feels like really it just could have been anyone else starring Sylvester Stallone, and it would have been fine. Just an Uber Island exploitation revenge flick, fine. Right, I'm here for it. I'll happily see that. Great. But the fact it was Rambo, you're just like, you could have done so much more.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been his lesser franchise for me, of the two big ones. But at the same time, First Blood's a genuinely good film, and 2 has its moments, and 4 was all right in a very B movie way, you know. And it did bring the character full circle, so they brought him back to do this. I don't know.
Yeah,
wasn't great.
He should have died at the end. That's the other thing. I was expecting him to like. I think the girl should have lived because the girl ends up dying. So it ends up.
Yeah, they killed her off really early, and you think, well, we only met her a few minutes ago. Is it, you know? Do we buy, as an audience? Do we care? Well, no. But do we at least buy he cares? Well, they did enough lifting in the first 20 minutes that he's clearly close to these people. So I bought his motivation, but it wasn't enough to get the audience to invest particularly. And then they killed her off really quickly.
Yeah, which was sad, but the whole thing, I think, should have been Rambo. You know, if it's going to be his last stand, should we say, or his last blood, it should be him fighting for something. And for that something to not really be like just revenge kind of thing, it's just like, well...
I feel like ever since the first film, he's been fighting for something else but himself. First Blood was him. First Blood was him being disrespected and triggered. The second film was for his country, effectively. The third was for his mentor. The fourth was for some, you know, for whatever that was. I haven't seen it in a few years, but it's definitely to go and get some hostages, I think. I can't remember now. To bring it full circle, I wish he'd been almost like fighting for himself a bit more. But hey-ho. I wasn't expecting much, and it fell below what I was expecting.
For fighting for his home, basically.
I was rather shocked. Rather shocked, and I didn't expect much. As I say, this is a B-movie franchise. I wasn't expecting a lot, and it just fell under anything I could have expected. And whilst I'm sure conditions like that exist in Mexico, it was such an over the top, one-sided depiction of anything to do with that country that it was bordering on the offensive. I just thought it was a crap film.
Well, that was the thing about it though, which was like kind of all the reviews just seemed to be like blah blah blah, Trump this, Trump that. It's like, it's nothing to do with Trump.
It's nothing to do with Trump. There's been a draft of this film with this story since Obama's first term, I think. Yeah, for
ages. So
no, and I did point that out in the review. I can see how people came to that conclusion though.
But I just thought it was just
it did come off a bit foreigners bad.
Well, I mean, look, I don't know, but you know, the way it was, the way it was like it was always the same sort of thing. This is a bad area. I don't think anyone under illusion, right, sort of thinks this is a representation of Mexico. And I think even sort of people from Mexico would probably say,
and I don't think
there's rough areas.
Stallone thinks that either. Yeah. So I just think it's an unfortunate byproduct of a film that just wasn't that well thought through.
Yeah.
And I think you gave people that ammunition when you didn't really need to. At the same time, if you're going to have him go down into Mexico, he's not going to get there and go, oh, they've got some nice restaurants here. Blimey, this is actually much nicer than I was expecting. It's nice to have authentic Mexican food rather than our version.
Let's have a Corona and a burrito. Well,
yeah, exactly. Wow, this is lovely.
Can you imagine it? Imagine it just being like you know, Rambo, but the trip.
instead of Last Blood, it's like Last Orders, and it's just him in various bars going, "This is really quite a nicely decorated place, and the beer's so much nicer than we get." Yeah.
Bit of lime, yes, please.
Yeah. What did you think about Astra?
Ad Astra, I'm trying to remember it now because it's been that long. But
I think that says it all, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very nice, but I think that some like the set pieces were pretty interesting though. Like I remember, like there was one chase like which was on like
one on the surface of the moon.
Yeah, and it was just the idea of actually people like it being like a tourist attraction. And there's like a place that people go on holiday and stuff, and there's like there's also like sort of pirates. And it just that little sort of world building I thought was really impressed by.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of the things where you just kind of like stumbled along and sort of like just killing.
I just often wondered where we were going with any of it. To be honest.
I mean, I did kind of make music how we just seemed to sort of just like kill random fellow astronauts just by trying to like not go against the grain. He's like, oh no, I'll kill you. Oh, never mind. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, he gets to Tommy Lee Jones, and which is basically like the what you call
His dad.
yeah, but in terms of Apocalypse Now, it's the Colonel Klutz, isn't it?
It's Colonel Kurtz.
Yeah, Kurtz.
Not
Klutz.
That would be like the comedy spin-off where
Yes.
he gets there and there's someone really clumsy. Hi, Dad. Pratfall.
Someone needs to make that now.
Yeah.
Colonel Klutz.
Kurtz, yeah. Yeah, it's Hearts of Darkness, basically.
But yeah, I would actually watch it again though, because it's very good world building.
I found it quite soothing.
Yeah, it felt very sci-fi as well.
If you took Apocalypse Now's plot and mixed it with like the tone of Moon, you're close.
Yeah.
It feels low budget like Moon as well, and I don't mean it looks unconvincing. It actually pulls off what it's trying to do fairly well, but it doesn't go for anything too showy or big budget.
No, but I definitely liked it. I definitely want to see it again. Definitely.
And just the contrast. The most interesting thing is his dad's attitude to the job and his family is completely different to what his is. And when he gets there, it's kind of disappointing, which is a little Colonel Kurtz because, you know, Colonel Kurtz is a legend. And Willard is sent to assassinate him because he's gone mental. Well, there's less surprise in that. But again, it is a little bit like an heroic figure turning out to be rather a disappointment. It's really well shot. It's shot by Van Hoytema, who shot Spectre.
Yeah.
Which, apart from the piss filter, was quite a nice-looking film. And the music's Lorne Balfe and others. Lorne Balfe did Mission Impossible 6, and he's done video games like Assassin's Creed as well. So I liked it. I didn't love it. It's not enough's happening for me to love it, but it was all right. I think next one in order, not that we have to cover everything, but Joker. I think I don't want to say a lot about Joker. I thought it was a great leading performance, but that film so desperately wanted to be a Scorsese film.
Oh yeah, Joker. See, I definitely got that vibe from the get-go anyway. I mean, even before I saw the film, I could tell, it's going for Taxi Driver or King of Comedy. It was going for that Scorsese. I mean, it was even produced by Scorsese, wasn't it, at some point? So
I'm not sure, but I know. I mean, it's got Robert De Niro totally miscast, actually, and it's almost like he feels he's being passed the baton or something by putting him in it. Maybe, I don't know, but it feels very early '80s New York, even though it's meant to be Gotham. But it feels like that sort of Taxi Driver through Raging Bull through King of Comedy era. Tonally, it's Taxi Driver. Story evokes King of Comedy more, definitely, because King of Comedy is a surprisingly light film with a dark topic. It's like a PG version of Taxi Driver.
It is actually a PG, which actually quite surprised me.
Yeah, it's a PG version of Taxi Driver in its kind of way, whereas this film is kind of dark and harrowing in its way. It's Taxi Driver in tone. It's King of Comedy in most obvious sort of story influence. And both of those films are recommended. I prefer the King of Comedy. I think it's the stronger film.
Yeah, I think it's got more in it, of King Comedy.
I think it's way better than Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver is a raw, open wound of a film. It's a little bit like Raging Bull in that you don't really end up pulling for anyone, but at least Raging Bull just looks amazing and has those reenactments of boxing and things like that, and echoes the era where you had 3 ropes and smoky crowds and the light bulb going off on photographs and stuff like that. Raging Bull is so stylish. Whereas Taxi Driver, I've always, it's a bit like Seven. I've always admired it and never really liked it. King of Comedy, I like a great deal. And I like Raging Bull, but I know you don't, Chris, and I understand why, for the same things I've just said about Taxi Driver.
Yeah, Taxi Driver is a very, very raw. I mean, Raging Bull's just a bit like... I never got... I mean, I've seen it once, and I just found it really, really repetitive and really kind of dull.
Yeah, we'll do Scorsese one day, and we'll make sure Raging Bull's in it, so you'll get a chance to see it and talk about it again.
Yeah,
I've always liked it a lot more than Taxi Driver. I think
Taxi
Goodfellas
is really grimy and gritty, isn't it? It's really kind of really dirty and like. Whereas King of Comedy, it is a
King of
bit
Comedy feels
lighter.
just cleaner. It just everything from the characters to the lack of grain in the film. It feels cleaner and brighter.
But there's an underlining real darkness behind it all as well.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
But
real.
so Joker takes so much from those films, it almost damages them. It's almost enough for me to go, I don't think it should have been in the Best Picture race, even had I loved it, because it isn't like Tarantino taking lots of influences and remixing. It is almost like, I think what doesn't help is the director gave various interviews in and around the release of this film where he sounded like a piss pot. He sounded so self-important. The stuff he said about comedy and how woke everything is now, which is bollocks. You can still make anything, to be honest, with some kind of exceptions, I imagine.
Maybe not in. It may be more of a Hollywood thing, because Hollywood is more, should we say, wokish than it is. It may be more of an internal thing. I mean,
but the idea,
you might be right in terms of like
there is still plenty being made, and the fact is, he made mostly bad films. You know, his filmography is not that good, and then he comes along and does this and gets incredibly self-important about it. And I think it's just a pale Scorsese ripoff. It's okay. It's anchored by a really good performance. I mean, I have to say, and it's the best representation of sort of delusions I've seen since Fight Club. You know, where you see something and later you find out it was all in his head.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it done that well since Fight Club.
Yeah, I think what I gathered from a lot of people seems to be sort of like quite a good sort of show of like mental health on people today, especially in more downtrodden society.
Got to be careful about commenting on that, because I mean, not that what you've said isn't entirely fair. That we're saying from outside of suffering like that person might suffer, it looks fairly real, and what we're reading is fairly real. I don't know, if I'm honest, because I've never had any sort of delusional complaints or anything. I did read someone say you would never be on that mix or that many tablets, but you know, whatever. Definitely, the bit where he's actually doing comedy and it's going wrong, and he starts laughing and then starts getting a bit I've seen someone who couldn't stop laughing. I have met someone with that mental health complaint. Years ago. It's really, really unsettling. It was someone who used to come into a bar I was working in when I was like 20. I was sort of between years at university, basically. And this guy came in, and I later heard story. It turned out my father knew his father, and I heard stories like almost the wrong way round years later about how troubled this kid had been and how much difficulty he'd been to the family. And he was in his 20s, well into his 20s by this point. He was considerably older than me. But over time, he got more and more erratic in the bar. And he would stand there and literally just giggle at you. And it was really, really unsettling. I don't know how accurate this is. I know it's a very, very strong performance. It's a bit otherworldly as well, because he lost a lot of weight, and you see a lot of shots of him without his top on, like bent over slightly. So you see like the line of his spine. And it looks almost Giegerish sometimes.
He's hunched over and just kind of like almost skeletal, isn't he?
Yeah.
There's also a lot of dancing in it as well. He's like kind of like also like moves kind of like.
He moves well. The only scene I struggled with actually is I genuinely thought he played that last scene where he's with De Niro and ends up shooting him. Sorry, folks, but if you haven't seen it by now, I should have said spoilers though and given you a chance. But sorry about that. But I thought he played that too small. You know, the Joker being such a theatrical character, I thought he played that last scene too small. But apart from that, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it just fine. But it was a far more, largely the director, nobody else. But it was just, he was so self-important about it. And, you know, I think he thought he'd made something a bit more than it was. What he made was a decent film with a very good lead. I don't think that would fit very easily into the Batman universe just because of what Joker tends to be. This guy is just far too damaged. But, you know, I don't know.
Well, Joker should never have an origin story anyway.
No, he should never have an origin story. The Joker is historically not Arthur Fleck. You see an origin story in The Killing Joke, the book, but at the end of it, doubt is, it is like in The Dark Knight. It's like my past is multiple choice. Every time he explains his scars, he tells a different story. It's that sort of thing. There's a version of his backstory, but he's probably making some shit up.
Yeah, I mean,
but he was a failed comedian. The film has taken that from it.
Oh, is that definite for
in the in The Killing Joke, the backstory that we don't know if is accurate might be some shit that's made up. He's a failed comedian but he's got a wife and he's panicking about not being. I think she's pregnant and he's panicking about being able to look after them. And there's a crime story, like a Red Hood crime story in it. Yeah, I don't see where you would go with this. And they're now talking about sequels and that. Just fucking leave it. I know it made $1 billion, but sorry, if you keep making good films with the DC imprint on it, you'll make billions. You will make billions. You don't need a sequel to this. Aquaman either did it or nearly did it. You got a Batman film coming out next year, and presumably that will have its own Joker at some point if we get multiple entries. So, yeah, leave this as a curio. A one-shot. And Elseworlds, a what if, here's a possible origin story for the Joker. May not be true, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does feel very one-shot, because how would it fit in the rest of the Batman universe?
Yeah, although it's set in 1981, and 1981 is the year the Affleck's Batman lost his parents. They're coming out from seeing Excalibur in Batman Superman. So, theoretically, this could be the Affleck universe, but we're never going to see Affleck in the role again. So it's just an idea.
And this might not be there could be other Jokers. It could be like the first one.
This could be the one that influences our Joker. This could be a different Earth, an Elseworlds. A bit like The Dark Knight Returns is Earth 66 or something else. You know what I mean? It's just a what if. And I don't mind that approach, because then you can keep some sort of loose continuity with some of the films, but do these little interesting one-shots that are director-led and not with a producer overview, and you don't damage anything. This doesn't stop you having a Joker face-off against Pattinson at all.
No. But
I recognise the one that played Alfred was married at one time or had a child with Tessa Peake Jones, Raquel from Only Fools and Horses, and he played the older Damien in a dream sequence.
He played the what?
The older Damien, Derek Trotter's kid.
Oh, right. Oh,
in a dream sequence, yeah, that's Douglas Hodge.
Oh, was it? Yeah. The only thing I remember about him, because he was just without a goatee, went, Rodney! Yeah,
that's him.
Oh, right.
He had a child with Tessa Peake Jones a few years ago. I think after she had the child in the show, Damien, when you see her in the Christmas special that year, the Miami Twice episode, she's a bit bulkier, and it's because she's just had a baby, and it was the baby she had with him. So that kid's 28, 29 now. So yeah, what else does that mean?
I feel old now.
Yeah, Gemini Man. Did you see Gemini Man?
Yeah, it was all right.
I don't know what it must have been like in the high frame rate, because it looked dreadful in the normal framework. The effect was terrible. I was never convinced that was a real person at all, the younger Will Smith, because they didn't do de-aging on his face. They built a digital version of him, full stop, and it looks shit. In high frame rate, that must have looked terrible.
I don't think it looked too bad, but then I'm not as
It was taking me out of the film bad.
Yeah.
I thought it was awful. And I thought, why have they made this? The story's pretty shit anyway. And I haven't got much more to say about it.
The story was very, very, very generic. Very generic.
Because I thought with Ang Lee on it, he made, along with Avatar, I suppose, arguably the best looking live action 3D film in Life of Pi. And he's a very good visual stylist. And he normally does a little bit more than the technology can do, almost, in that Life of Pi with the tiger, really realistic looking. A lot of people complain about the way his Hulk looked, but it actually looks more in the shot than the 2008 version for me. Off not a massive budget. So I thought this would look amazing at least, and it really didn't. And I just thought, what drew Ang Lee to do this? And it's a shame because, like, Will Smith's, I still think Will Smith, he was pretty good in the last Bad Boys film. He's still got something to offer.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of those films that's like been touted out for years and years. There's always going to be like, the younger version against the older version. This is one of those like ideas, but and it finally comes out and it's just very so what. But,
yeah, and it's also like the prequels in the way that we waited for the effects to be ready, and I thought, well, you could have waited a bit longer then, because they weren't there. It didn't quite look like a younger Will Smith, the young Will Smith as he looked at the time as well. But as much as that, Will Smith's actually aged so well. Really, I know there's a bit of grey in him and stuff like that, but Will Smith doesn't actually look markedly different than he did 15 years ago. He looks a little different than when he was early Fresh Prince, but
I mean that's what they're kind of going for, weren't they?
Suddenly we end up with a fucking third clone near the end, and you think that just undermines the whole story, the whole investment in him and everything. It was a strange film, and it was a bit of a thankless task. When you think about the bad guy in it and stuff, it's like you've just undermined everything about him. Yeah, there's one decent action sequence. That sequence on the bikes,
yes,
was good.
Yeah, I thought some of it, like the initial, like sort of, shall we say, confrontation, is pretty good.
The setup was good for 20-25 minutes or so. It was pretty good, and when we didn't get that good a look at him, but I mean, there's a scene where he sort of meets with his quote unquote father. After a failed mission, and it just looks like somebody talking to fucking Jar Jar Binks or something. Of course, it's nowhere near that bad. But the more real something is meant to look, the more likely you are to slip down Uncanny Valley.
Yeah.
The Na'vi look fine because they don't exist. We got nothing to compare it to. Digitize a person and it does look bad. I don't know why they didn't use de-aging software. Will Smith is fit. Hey, I don't mean it in that way. But he's in. He's fit. No, he's in good shape, though, for his age, and he hasn't put on a ton of weight and that, so you could use de-aging software in a hairpiece if you wanted his hair to look a different style or whatever. I don't know why they went this route. It hurt the film.
I think it was probably just to explore technology, much like they did with The Lion King.
The Lion King was... Well, we talked about that in the summer review, I think, so I don't need to do that one again, but weren't fond. But mind you, it was flawless effect-wise. It was better than this effect-wise. But then again, animals are not as articulate facially. They don't have, that was one of the problems with the film. You can stylize emotion in a cartoon animal much better than you can in what's meant to be a real one or look like a real one. But so there you go. Dark Fate we covered in a podcast. We don't need to do that. I suppose the last one I'd want to talk about, because 21 Bridges was so fucking generic, I don't see the point in talking about it. But Ford versus Ferrari, Le Mans 66, did you see it?
No, I didn't see this one.
Oh, that's a shame, because I would have just probably finished on that one. For everything I said during the Oscars, it's worth seeing.
Yeah.
It really is, like, the chemistry between the two leads is really good. Bale and Damon, they're really good together. They're both really good in it. Bale's playing a character, as always. He tries to sort of disappear inside a character as much as he can, in that he's playing it with kind of a Midlands accent. Damon is Damon, but he's really good. They've got lovely chemistry. It's a lovely looking film. And the car chases, the only problem with the races is almost like a Freudian slip, though, because in a few of these races, and particularly the main Le Mans race, something goes wrong and they lose a lot of time, so it does become effectively a chase to catch up. Well, it does feel like a Herbie film. You never get a sense. Well, there's a race in Daytona where they've got to catch up a bit and it feels tense, like they just about do it. But it does seem in all the other car chases, no matter how far behind they fall, they catch up no problem. In that regard, it's like watching a Herbie film. But the sort of crunching realism of when they get hurt, because it's a very, very dangerous era in cars. I mean, Formula One around that time was just losing multiple drivers every single year. Most of the time, the cars would crash and catch fire. They couldn't get out of them because they just didn't have any of the same fire retardant stuff on board. Formula One cars are loaded with extinguishers now. They don't go up in flames in the same way. Even when they catch fire, they go out. Back then, they were just bombs on wheels, which is actually a line James Hunt, as you know, Chris Hemsworth says in Rush, that they're just bombs on wheels. They'd crash and go up, and the drivers just couldn't get out. And it displays all of that really well, and the struggle against the sort of corporate machine, if you like. And you end up almost rooting for a corporate machine, because they're working for a corporate machine that's trying to get one over on another corporate machine, which makes the film kind of interesting in its way. How it ended up Oscar nominated, I don't know, but it's really entertaining and really good looking, and it just evokes an era I wasn't around for. A bit like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in that regard. It makes me nostalgic for a time I never saw in a country I've never lived in. So it did its job. It was really good.
Yeah,
anything else to talk about?
It was made by the guy who's going to do Next Indie.
Oh fuck, we ought to just talk about that for a minute. I don't want an Indiana Jones film. I don't care that he's older in and of itself, but I do, because if you age the character in the same way, you put Indy in like the 70s or something. On the original release schedule, it would have been like the Woodstock era, which I don't really like. And I always got the impression he did 4, not Harrison, Spielberg did 4, kind of because the others wanted to. Whenever I saw anything about it, he was the least keen. His previous film had been like Munich. I really didn't think he wanted to go back to that kind of popcorn flick, but he did it as a favour to Lucas. And so when Lucas came out with batshit ideas like the fridge and the fucking interdimensional species, he went along with it because he was working almost as an employee of Lucas. And if you want to go back and listen to our Do You Expect Us to Talk episode on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it was in our first 40-odd episodes. It was mid-2016. But we talk about all of this. And so I felt it was coming from a filmmaker that wasn't entirely committed. And he wanted to do this practical effect film very like Raiders, but with Lucas on board. And Lucas was a very different man in that era than he'd been in the early 80s. It was CG to death. So it was a bad film. And when they came back this time, it seemed to be because of Spielberg. I saw him interviewed after something he did, and he said, what do you want to do next? And he said, well, I want to do this, I want to do this. And he said, I definitely want to do another Indiana Jones with Harrison Ford. And he stressed with Harrison Ford, not a reboot, Chris Pratt, anything like that. And I thought, well, he's motivated. He wants to do it. And Lucas is retired, so Lucas has got nothing to do with it. So there's a shot this will be good. Is he as consistent as he was in his heyday, Spielberg? No, but he still makes some really good films. I really enjoyed Bridge of Spies. I really like Lincoln. The last 10, 12 years of his career have been pretty good. And I thought, Ford seems really up for it. He's really up for it. He's the driving force behind it now. So we've got, at very least, we might get something of the standard of something like Tintin, which is almost an Indiana Jones film in itself. And Tintin's like a much underrated film. Yeah. It's kind of largely been forgotten now, but there were points during that film where I thought this is a bit like Raiders in kind of its kineticism. And
we're not going to see that Jackson sequel, are we?
Yeah, that's a bit. It was 2 years ago. We were told it was due in 3 years. So anyway, we've talked about that on podcasts as well. But the point is, I didn't think I'd get Raiders of the Lost Ark. I didn't think I'd get Last Crusade. But I thought I'd definitely get better than Temple of Doom and a lot better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I think those are both fairly bad films for different reasons. And we've done shows on them if you ever need that explained. If you feel differently, fair play. So I'm really surprised he's dropped out. That's what I'm going a long way around to saying, because why has he dropped out? It's like, well, they've already had delay after delay. He can find gap in his schedule somewhere. And for Spielberg these days, much unlike when he did stuff like Jaws, he's a very, very quick filmmaker. He's a bit like Ridley Scott in that regard. He can turn stuff around fairly quickly if he needs to. So suddenly you've taken away the main reason for doing the film, an engaged legendary filmmaker wanting to do it. and it's suddenly become this product we need to make. So who are we getting? And I think, well, if you're going to bring Mangold in, just reboot the fucking thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm Harrison Ford at 80 in the 70s without the driving force of the series there in the first place. I'm under no illusion they will reboot Indiana Jones at some point with a different actor back in sort of the era we associate the character with, fighting Nazis or whatever else. Probably. Maybe not. Probably. They may do something more sort of along the lines of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles on Disney Plus. But it won't be Harrison Ford forever. I'm happy to see a Harrison Ford in the role, but the trouble is you've got to put it in the 70s. That's a problem. And if you're not going to have Spielberg there, why do this? Why bother? I don't know what you think. Mangold's a very good filmmaker, by the way.
Part of me thinks, without the context of what you just said, I was thought, given after Crystal Skull, part of me thinking, you know what? Good. If you're going to get a new one, let's have a fresh take. Let's have someone who...
If you take Crystal Skull in isolation, you would definitely go, yeah, let's get somebody fresh in. And certainly if it was Lucas and Spielberg, I'd be going, no.
So, yeah, part of me thinking that, but also it's like, isn't Harrison Ford just too old? I mean, he was pushing it at Crystal Skull.
Well, in Crystal Skull, if you take away the fact that his son's in it and Marion's crap in it and all of the things that are wrong with that film, if you just put them aside, there's a bit where he's in a fist fight with that guy, the one who ends up getting dragged away by the ants. And I thought, fuck me, he's still pretty good at this. Because Indy's a scrappy fighter anyway. He's not meant to look like fucking Bruce Lee or something.
No.
And it's meant to be a bit scrappy and make it up as you go along. And Ford could still do it in his mid-60s. Now we're looking nearly 15 years on again, so I don't know. But Crystal Skull, Harrison Ford wasn't the problem.
No, it wasn't.
The problem was the CG look, the plot, Shia LaBeouf, fucking even Karen, what's she called, Karen Allen. I loved her in other films, a couple of other films I've loved her in, but she wasn't very good in that film. Everything looked like it was on a set because most things were. It's one of the worst performances. It's the worst performance I've ever seen from Cate Blanchett. Just everything was wrong with that film. It's not quite as comedically bad as some people will make out, and it's a bit of a photo finish with Temple of Doom, because Temple of Doom is such a thin film, actually. Forget the tone of it, it's such a thin film. So yeah, I think I'd have been on board with you there to say change it all, but it was purely the amount Spielberg stressed it as like a late career priority. Like, yes, I make films quite quickly. Yes, I'm not looking to retire. But the subtext to all of it was, I'm not getting any younger. I've got, a certain number of films left in me. We don't know how big that number is. And I want one of them to be one last Raiders film with Harrison Ford. Implicit to that is also, perhaps we didn't make that good one the last time.
Yeah, let's kind of make up.
Yeah. So I'm a bit disappointed. Mangold's a good filmmaker. He's just come off two excellent films. I don't love Logan as much as most, but I think it's a very brave film, very well made. It's actually more or less the last act that ruins it for me. Yeah. But not ruins it. I still think Logan is a superior film. Had Logan won awards, I'd have been perfectly happy. If people said to me, it's the best comic film book film ever made, I'd go, fair enough. I understand that point of view. So Mangold can be a very, very good filmmaker. But I just think if it's in with the new and out with the old...
I can see him doing an indie. Out of that choices that isn't Spielberg, he's not a bad choice.
He would be fairly high up my list, actually. If you said you have to make an indie film with a director. Years ago, I would have said J.J. Abrams, but he's made two of the worst films of the last decade for me. Yeah. Into Darkness and Rise of Skywalker, I'm quite happy to keep him away from everything I like now. But he was pretty good at doing impressions of Spielberg. See Super 8 for details. And if he got a strong enough writer, I think he'd do a decent job, because The Force Awakens was good. I liked The Force Awakens. But when you're saying, right, we've got to left to his own devices, quite often his plots are just fucking dreadful.
I think you need something with a bit of grit in him.
Yeah, Mangold. Yeah, he's a bit bubblegum, isn't he? Yeah, I'd be happy with Mangold, except we're now looking at 80-year-old Harrison Ford in the 1970s, divorced from those really good films. Two of them I really, really like. And it's not like James Bond, if James Bond had only ever lived in the 60s and then you suddenly made a really disappointing one with Sean Connery in the late 80s, you might then say 12 years after that again, perhaps Bond belongs in the 60s. And actually, because that's effectively what's happened with Indiana Jones, I think he kind of belongs in the 30s and 40s. It didn't look right seeing him amongst greasers, to be honest.
No.
Putting him amongst fucking hippie and... Well, he's beyond hippie and flower power now. We're getting well into the 70s. So if they do it in any kind of real time, I think it will be... If it were next year, I think in real time it would be 1970, actually.
Yeah.
Because the last one was 1957. So I don't know. We'll just see. I'm not excited by it. I know that, but there's no chance I'm not going to see it. Of course, I'll go to
definitely.
it.
I mean, look, the proof's in the pudding, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's not definitely going to be shit.
We don't know about the plot. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's just all just thinking. We don't know. But it's the idea of Indy coming back, and I'm kind of thinking, kind of like you, should just leave it alone, or if you're going to do it, just reboot it and start from scratch. But
because now it's owned by Disney, that's going to happen. So for all those saying heresy and everything else, it'll happen at some point. So grasp the fucking nettle.
I mean, I kind of would rather they just sort of rip it off rather than make Indy, and be tied to...
But they're not going to do that because you've got the IP, and they've tried it in the past. Sahara was meant to be, the new equivalent to... it's like how many franchises over the years was to be like the new Star Wars, and eventually it took Star Wars coming back, and it's the same with Indy. They've tried, Tomb Raider to a degree, the 90s ones anyway, or the 2000s ones rather, Sahara... King Solomon's Mines. King Solomon's Mines are really fucking...
Uncharted.
Uncharted. But although in video games you can sort of reskin these things a little bit differently. Uncharted has run through so many directors, it ain't funny.
I know.
But we'll see. That's still due out end of the year, I think. That's got to slip. That has got to slip. They haven't even started yet, and they lost their director recently. Again.
Who was it this time round?
I can't even remember now. It's been through several. I think Ruben Fleischer might have been involved at one point or another. I mean, this has been around since, it was going to be Mark Wahlberg. And it's now Mark Wahlberg's the sort of older mentor figure. I'm just going to see if I can find the film adaptation, live-action fan film, not that one. Ruben Fleischer's helming now. He's a mixed bag because he's done Zombieland and the Zombieland sequel.
Gangster Squad. And
but
Venom.
He did Gangster Squad was crap. And Venom I wasn't in love with, but Zombieland's, I don't know. That film could be anything with him at the helm. But it's been, it's had loads run through it. Loads. I can't even remember, to be honest. I genuinely can't remember all the different names that have been attached to it. And that's since it's been Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. It's been 2 or 3, at least. I mean, if you include when it was Mark Wahlberg in the main character, in the main role, I think I got a feeling it may even have gone through David O. Russell's at one point. So yeah, there's been so many.
What's David O. Russell doing now?
Well, he's still a pig. But what is he working on? I can't tell you. Let me just look.
What's
David.
the beef with David Russell, by the way?
Well, he's quite the bully on set. I mean, you can read about his behaviour on the set of Three Kings. He
didn't get on with Clooney, did he?
Clooney either hit him or threatened to hit him because he was such a bully to an extra. There's a video of him screaming at Lily Tomlin on I Heart Huckabees. And there are endless stories about this, and the narrative has become he's reformed and he's not the same person anymore. But actually, some more stories have leaked about how he still treats people the same way. He's got a team up with Christian Bale coming up. It's not titled. It's got Margot Robbie and Michael B. Jordan in it. No one knows what that is. I have to say I quite like his films, by and large. I Heart Huckabees I never saw and was a bit of a misfire. But certainly from The Fighter on, he's made 4 films, and I've really enjoyed 3, and the 4th, Joy, was okay. I liked Three Kings all those years ago, but the man has something of a temper on him. And there may be, I don't know. There's stuff about, there's other stuff. You'd have to search it.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit and badmouth somebody. I mean, the stuff I've just said is on record, and actually, as I say, the Lily Tomlin one, you can find video of it. He has certainly done things that I would be ashamed of, but we've all done things we'd be ashamed of. People can change, but I don't know. I don't know what he is now, but there you go.
And yeah, so
is that about us?
I think so. I mean, we've done a good 2 hours, if that, if not more.
Yeah, we've done a fairly long session. I think it's about 2:40 or something. We'll see when I get the file. Yeah, it's just literally tonight's episode exists because Do You Expect Us to Talk is off air at the moment, but it's, as we always are keen to stress with any of this, Do You Expect Us to Talk isn't going anywhere. It's not the beginning of the end. It's not we've lost interest. It's not we don't want to do it. It's just circumstances. Simple as that. We had similar last year and we lost about 11 weeks. By the time we come back here, I think it's going to be 6 or 7. Yeah, I think that's just the way it is. Illness started off with illness in the camp. Chris moved house as well. I know that was a while before, wasn't it? But we've just had things on. And currently Becca is not well, hence she's not here, but we are. And when she's here, we'll be doing John Wick 2, John Wick 3, Fast and Furious. If Fast 9 is delayed, then we won't at least miss doing that. And yeah, all the other things we've announced.
And yeah, so you can follow us on social media, which I barely tweet, but there you go. On Cinematronix, you can find all this. You can find all the episodes on cinematronix.co.uk, where this will be posted as well. David, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, our Twitter feed is at Expect Us to Talk. We're facebook.com/Expect Us to Talk. Do You Expect Us to Talk has a YouTube channel as well, which is nothing visually that stimulating, but if you prefer YouTube for any vision, our shows are on there, with the exception of the music ones, because of rights. I think one is on there, but I haven't bothered since because the second one got blocked. Some of our early episodes, I went as far as cutting out the intros to take the music off and stuff. They normally go through now, so most of our episodes are there, but they are just set to a still photo. It's just to give people another outlet. As for me, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter, and you can follow Becca at r_view_movies, I think it is. But again, if you go to the Do You Expect Us to Talk page at Expect Us to Talk, it's got all of our Twitter handles in the blurb at the top, and that's it.
Yeah, and so that's a lot for now. Hopefully this will tide you over to when we come back to record, but I'm sure we'll be back soon.
To paraphrase Bottom Live, that's it, fuck off.
What better way to end it?